This guy is an F-rank hunter who had 0 skills. But that changed when he discovered the global top 1 hunter's secret to being the absolute best. Unfortunately, Gongjia also found out the strongest hunter's dirty secret. People call the Flame Emperor a genius, breaking every record while other talented hunters fail. But only the MC knows the dark truth behind his success. When the Flame Emperor realized he was exposed, he needed to eliminate the witnesses. So he slaughtered Gongjia like it was just a fun game for him. However, Gongjia awakened a legendary skill nobody ever thought possible, and now, the strongest S-rank hunter is going to pay for it, because he created the biggest madman of all time, and this madman craves revenge. In this world, a mysterious tower called Babylon appeared. It is so massive you can see it from anywhere on Earth, and those who had nothing to lose were the very first to step inside and explore what was in there. Every single floor of the tower was filled with otherworldly monsters, and crazy skills awakened for a select few visitors chosen by the tower. Those who heard the news quickly gathered at the tower and started to hunt those monsters. For years, hunters targeted clearing all the tower's floors, but right now, absolutely nobody has managed to beat the 40th floor. But then this guy showed up. He managed to clear over 10 floors completely solo, something not even the strongest top guilds could do. Soon he became wildly famous. Girls wanted him, and boys wanted to be exactly like him. Our protagonist was also one of these losers. He has been stuck at F rank for years and lacks any awakened skill inside the tower. Since he was a kid, his ultimate dream was to climb all the floors. On the day the biggest guild failed a massive raid, and that lone hunter soloed it. The Emperor said in an interview that success belongs to those who deserve it, and for those who oppose him, death will be their final destiny. At that exact moment, the protagonist felt so much insane jealousy toward the Flame Emperor that the system appeared for him too. It finally happened. I awakened a skill, Gongjia thought. The system stated that between heaven and earth, he was the most envious human alive, and because of that, it would grant him a unique skill. Gongjia remembered other hunters who filmed the exact moment they awakened, so he felt the system was being totally unfair to him. But that didn't matter, because he received a glowing golden card. It was S rank for sure, and that was totally true. Then, the system announced the skill name was I Want to Become Like You, an S+ rank. The crazy effect would activate automatically upon getting killed by an enemy, copying one of his killer's skills and stealing it for himself. It wasn't possible to copy twice from the exact same opponent, and the stolen skill would be chosen randomly. However, to actually use it, he would have to die. The protagonist yelled, "What the hell is this trash skill? I simply have to die to use it?" His new skill was so ridiculous that the protagonist spent the next few days completely depressed. He didn't even report to the Hunters Association because he was too ashamed to tell anyone his skill was total garbage. After saying that and drinking all night long, he had a brutal hangover and a massive headache. While lying flat on the floor, he heard a voice screaming for help. Then, the protagonist leaned up and listened to the Flame Emperor talking to a silver-haired girl. The Flame Emperor said she was a fantastic actress. Anyone seeing them now would easily assume she was the victim, but he knew the truth. The drink she was about to hand him was basilisk stomach acid, the very poison she planned to use. If not for his ability, things could have gone very wrong. The girl began to claim it was a misunderstanding, insisting she only wanted to join him on a tower hunt as a teammate. The Flame Emperor also said that they had waited for this, but he was mistaken. Gongjia, overhearing everything, was in shock, unable to comprehend their conversation. Was it a lover's quarrel or some kind of hunter dispute? Suddenly, the Flame Emperor grabbed the girl by the neck, declaring there was nothing left to discuss. From that moment on, he would ask the questions, and she only needed to nod and answer. If she tried to lie, he possessed a lie detector ability, so it wouldn't be wise for her to try. His first question was, who had ordered her to kill him? Was it the Black Dragon Witch? Hearing those words, the girl had nothing more to say and simply nodded. The Flame Emperor, understanding, stated he had already suspected as much and thus no longer needed her. He then incinerated her with his flames. The MC, witnessing the entire scene, wondered if this was the hero everyone claimed him to be. What he saw, however, was not a hero, but a psychopathic killer. Gongjia then started to run, accidentally stepping on a glass bottle. In that instant, the Flame Emperor found him. He even joked that he had gotten rid of all the rats in the vicinity, but it seemed he had forgotten one. The MC realized that look wasn't from a normal person, but a killer. And by the way he spoke, the Saint, that silver-haired girl, wasn't his first victim. He must have killed a dozen, or perhaps even more. As he thought this, the MC fell to the ground. Looking back, he saw his shoe, or rather, his foot. Slowly, the Flame Emperor approached him, while the MC trembled in fear. He simply kicked his foot towards him, and Gongjia began to beg for mercy, pleading for his life. However, the Flame Emperor ignored his pleas and simply asked if he had seen that. The MC, in shock, said he hadn't seen or heard anything. The Flame Emperor asked another question about what he hadn't seen, then suddenly grabbed Gongja by the neck and questioned how that was possible, as he was at the right time, in the right place, and he wasn't foolish enough to believe that. He declared that if the MC didn't want to end up like the saint, he should answer calmly. The MC realized he was a demon. His world, and even himself, had been observed by someone like him. However, the MC told the Flame Emperor about his lie detection ability, stating that if he used it on him, he would realize that he knew nothing and was nothing. The Flame Emperor looked at him with an uncertain expression, and seeing this, the MC wondered if he had killed the saint without any certainty, just because she was a little suspicious. The Flame Emperor said he wasn't that kind of person. Who did he think he was? Because the saint was truly going to kill him, and if he didn't kill her now, he would have been poisoned tomorrow. The MC asked how he knew that, so the Flame Emperor simply replied that he had his contacts, and added that since he was talking about the lie detector, he was indeed innocent. Gongja was relieved, saying he finally believed him. However, the Flame Emperor declared that he had already seen too much, and therefore, he would have to die. After his death, the MC began to remember his childhood, and recalled that his name was Gongja, a name he accepted from his orphanage director. However, he didn't want to die like this. We see the MC in a kind of empty space with a strange window in front of him, and he begins to wonder why he had to die like this. No, or rather why he had to live like this. The window in front of him stated that the conditions for his ability were met, and because of his death, from now on he would be copying a random ability from his killer. Thus, a new skill card was created. The MC looked up, wishing for the golden card, and declared that he wanted to live a better life. If he received just one more chance, just one more, he would make his life completely different. Gongja suddenly woke up, and in front of him was his computer displaying the news he had already seen. He noticed he was in his room again, and began to question why he was there. However, hearing the voice coming from his computer, he once again noticed the meaning in that news. The MC began to wonder what on earth that was, and was in shock, questioning how he had gotten home. He looked at his phone and saw that it had the same comments as before, and in front of him, the same news that had played the previous day was showing again. He truly didn't understand what was happening, and began to recap that a moment before he was killed, he had obtained a golden skill card. Recalling this, he told the skill card to open, and saw that his envy skill was there again. However, there was an additional skill in the middle, and it was the ability he stole from the Flame Emperor, which he copied when he died. It was called Returner's Clock, and its rank was X. This skill had a very simple effect. At the moment of his death, he returned 24 hours in time, and his memories and experiences were preserved. Seeing such a description, the MC realized that everything clicked. He noticed that this was the true formula to become the legendary hunter. That's why the Emperor was so sure the saint would kill him the next day, but he also killed the MC, who was innocent. Again, the interviewer asked the same question about the secret to success in becoming a legendary hunter, and the Flame Emperor said the same thing he had said the previous day, exactly the same words, that if anyone sought trouble with him, everyone would die. Hearing these words, Gongja began to get nervous and declared that now they would see who would die first. Suddenly, he heard someone shouting that something was on fire, and looking out the window, he noticed that a building was in flames. Outside, several people were gathered, trying to run and put out the fire. It is explained to us that this place where the MC lives is different from the outside world. It is a city made for people who entered the tower to become hunters, and the location he was in was the first floor of the tower. Gongja was running among the people, wondering what time it was, and noticed it was the same time he had gotten drunk yesterday. It was also the time the Flame Emperor destroyed the evidence of his homicide. Among the people trying to put out the fire was the rank 2 Black Dragon, the master of the Black Witch Guild. Further to the side was the rank 5, the master of the Healers and Pharmacists Guild, the Alchemist Master, and the one calming the people was the rank 10 and leader of the city's surveillance corporation, the Paladin. The MC remembers some people call his city the City of Ascension, but it was a city you couldn't leave once you entered. Since everyone was a hunter, most were accustomed to extreme situations like this one. As Gongja thought about this, he heard someone comment that they hadn't seen the Saintess at the moment, and she wasn't the type to be absent during emergencies. However, the Paladin replied that perhaps she had a date with her boyfriend, as she had noticed her spending a lot of time with the Flame Emperor. The Alchemist Master said she didn't like him much, as something about him didn't sit right with her. The very instant after she spoke those words, someone arrived. It was the Flame Emperor, joking that someone had played with fire without his permission. However, the MC wouldn't be fooled by that silly face. The Paladin thanked him for arriving so quickly, and asked if he could put out the fire. He asked what he would gain from it. Hearing that, Gongja was already getting annoyed, wondering how someone could be so brazen as to ask for a reward to save people when he himself had started the fire. The Paladin declared that he was very confident for being the rank 1 who saved the day. However, he said he didn't care what others thought of him, and since he wouldn't gain anything from the service, he would simply leave. However, the MC knew something no one else did. Everyone thought the Flame Emperor was just a slightly eccentric hero, yet he was the only one who knew his true nature as a bloodthirsty murderer. For that reason, he had to kill him. So the MC turned and started walking towards the Flame Emperor. People tried to stop him, but he refused. In his thoughts, he declared that for humanity and the honor of hunters, he had to eliminate him, and regardless of the method, that psychopathic killer needed to be exterminated. Suddenly, the MC ran and entered the fire. He noticed people's gazes on him and felt nothing but pain. However, this was the only way to kill that monster. Again, Gongjia went back 24 hours in time and once more woke up in his bed in his tiny, messy, and smelly apartment. The system window announced that he was currently a rank F hunter, and therefore, he would incur no penalty for using his skill. The MC remembered that killing the Flame Emperor in his current state was impossible. Even if he was lucky enough to kill him, it would only send him back 24 hours in time, as the Emperor also possessed that ability. So there was only one way for a weak hunter like him to kill him. At that very moment, while thinking about this, the MC recalled a news report where the Emperor spoke of the day he awakened his ability. It had been exactly 11 years prior. The interviewer joked with him, saying he had an excellent memory to recall it so clearly, but the Flame Emperor replied that it wasn't quite like that, because coincidentally, he awakened on his birthday. More precisely, 11 years ago on June 7th. The MC calculated that it would be exactly 4,050 days ago. If he killed himself 4,050 times, he could go back to before the day the Emperor awakened. Again, Gongjia went back 24 hours in time and once more did the same thing over and over again. Since he was a rank F who had nothing, he would receive no penalty for using the skill. Then, he finally reached the last day and once again woke up in his room. He looked at the clock and realized he had succeeded. All those newspapers he had on his wall about the Flame Emperor had vanished. He had truly returned to the time when the legend of the Flame Emperor had not yet begun. He ended up dying 30 more times than the original plan, which was 4,050 times, including the time it took to kill himself, as well as a few escapes here and there. He had only gone back all this time to prove that the legend of that demon was not eternal. From now on, he would prove to everyone that he would usher in a new era. 11 years prior, on May 6th at 11 a.m., more specifically in the former Flame Emperor's building, he woke up to his alarm clock, having drunk too much the day before. Well, the MC already knew this, as he had relived this day 10 times to plan the perfect strategy, and it was flawless. Every day at 9 a.m., he wakes up in the rank F dormitory and always plans to go to work. Then, at 3 p.m., he collects slimes in the hunting grounds on the second floor, and as always, he was complaining about this life. The MC even realizes that his 21-year-old self is just a common F-rank hunter wishing for a golden card. The Flame Emperor, or rather, Yu Suha, wished for a skill or to win the lottery. Normally, his wishes would come true within a week, but that wasn't going to happen, as such a future wasn't meant for someone like him. At 5:31 p.m., Yu Suha said he wouldn't get anywhere just hunting slimes, so he headed to a higher and more difficult area than where beginner hunters usually go, a place where for the next 36 minutes, he would be alone. This was the perfect opportunity. Gongjia approached him, asking for help, claiming he had been attacked by a wolf, and asked if he had any kind of potion to heal him. Yu Suha became indignant, asking if he had already dealt with the monster in that area. It would be bad, as he wouldn't be able to meet his daily quota. The MC asked him to give him a potion, and Yu Suha replied that he didn't have any, as he couldn't even complete his daily mission. However, if the MC had something to trade, he would offer the potion. The MC asked why he was asking for something in return, and Yu Suha replied that his hunt had been ruined, and yet he was expected to give a potion for free. The MC said he would pay for the potion, but needed to use it quickly before he died. However, Yu Suha stated that he wasn't understanding the situation. The MC was on the verge of death, yet he didn't want to pay the potion's value. Did he think his life was worth so little? Then the MC said he would pay 20 gold for the potion, but Yu Suha didn't accept. He wanted everything the MC had. The MC already knew this. He knew what kind of person Yu Suha was. Yu Suha said the MC was quite poor for having only 60 coins at most, and Gongjia replied that those were all his savings. Yu Suha said he didn't need to worry, as he would spend them very well, because that's how life works. The MC asked for the potion since he had handed over the money. However, Yu Suha said he had thought about it for a bit, but if he let the MC go, he might come back for revenge later. And of course, Yu Suha needed to live a worry-free life. Since the MC had seen his face, he should just die. At that very moment, the MC ducked down and delivered a kick right between Yu Suha's legs, declaring that he would live a worry-free life. Instantly, he drew his sword and slit Yu Suha's throat. The MC began to attack again and declared that, to prevent the 1 in a million chance of Yu Suha awakening and threatening his life, he would make sure to finish him off properly. At that moment, the MC killed Yu Suha and began to wonder. Killing him was expected, but something bothered him. Why, in that moment before killing him, did he say his name? However, the MC understood after 4,090 deaths. He realized that despite being a cold-blooded killer, he wanted to pretend to be a holy knight in a sacred duel. Given his actions, this was not justified. Acting righteously after killing all those innocent people was simply hypocrisy. As the MC was saying this, wolves appeared behind him. Gongjia realized the wolves wanted to eat Yu Suha's corpse, and since his work was done, it no longer mattered. The MC walked to a strange sand mound and began to dig it. When he opened the hole, there was a backpack and 3 bottles inside. He changed into cleaner, blood-free clothes and began to wonder if it was finally over. He was then teleported to the first floor and noticed there were people from the Vigilante Corporation corporation. However, he was afraid to pass them because of the smell of blood. Yet, he walked past calmly, and no one suspected him. He realized it was finally over, and no one knew what had happened. And of course, to celebrate, he went to the bar and was drinking heavily. In his thoughts, he was happy, because the Flame Emperor, Yu Suha, no longer existed. People were saying he was quite happy that day, and he replied that he had to celebrate, as all the problems in his life had finally ended. At that very moment, he opened his status window. However, looking at it, he realized he had no combat skills, but he was happy, because he realized that this was nothing more than greed and shamelessness. Since he had a time reversal ability, he could win the lottery or sell the method for clearing the upper floors that no one else knew yet. While the MC was thinking this, someone arrived, an old man in a suit wearing red sneakers. He ordered the waiter some milk mixed with a little vodka and sugar. The MC noticed this guy was quite strange. However, the people in the bar started whispering among themselves, wondering how he was there. Looking closer at the old man, the MC realized who he was, the #1 ranked hunter of that era, known as the Sword Saint. Let's get to know this Sword Saint. His real name is Marcus Callenberry. Many people had forgotten him after 11 years, as a long time had passed since his disappearance. But until the Flame Emperor had risen to fame, he was the true #1 of the tower. The MC didn't know he was standing in front of the strongest guy of that era, and wondered if he had several S-rank abilities, unlike his own strange abilities that were useless for combat. Following this line of thought, he remembered that his ability allowed him, if he died, to steal any ability from a hunter who killed him. This meant he could steal the current abilities of the top one. Even if the old man killed him, he couldn't truly die, as he would just go back one day. The MC started looking at comments about the Sword Saint online, where people said no one knew what kind of ability he had. There were even rumors that he came from a rich family in the north, but left everything to enter the tower. However, looking at all these comments, the MC realized that the Sword Saint was shrouded in mystery, and there was no useful information, only rumors. It would be good if he at least had half the desire for attention and fame that the Flame Emperor had. Suddenly, the old man told him to shut up. However, the MC realized he wasn't talking to him, but rather talking to himself. The MC even realized that, based on the rumors of him talking to himself, at least that part was true. He wondered why all the top-ranked individuals always had some kind of issue in their head. Continuing to look at the internet comments, the MC found a comment that said it was not good to utter a word in front of the Sword Saint, and this was a 100% true story witnessed firsthand. According to the sender, if you don't want to die, never say that in front of the Sword Saint. The story goes that high-ranked guys got into a fight with the Sword Saint in the hunting grounds of the 9th floor. These guys were mocking him, telling him to use a hearing aid since he was becoming a senile old man, and that based on his face and personality, his grandchildren would also be terrible people. After those words, the Sword Saint simply split the man in half. Everyone might think this was nonsense, but either way, it was not good to talk about the Sword Saint's grandchildren in front of him. The MC realized that could be tested to see if it was true. The Sword Saint was a bit agitated, so he paid for his drink and left. Everyone in the bar, who had been silent, started declaring that he had finally left, saying he was an old man with weapons and muttering to himself. The MC did the same and left. From that moment on, he went in search of the #1 ranked individual. The MC started wondering where he had gone. Since he followed him as soon as he left, he couldn't have gone too far. Looking ahead of the people, he found him and started following him. This was easy, as the only person who dresses like that in all of Babylon is easy to find. The MC started wondering what kind of ability he would have. Is it like the Flame Emperor, whose rank X abilities allowed him to go back in time? So, the Sword Saint was successful even before the Flame Emperor. He must have something much better. Could he have some kind of ability even stronger than going back in time? Suddenly, the Sword Saint stopped and said that this place should be suitable. The MC was surprised by his words, and the Sword Saint told him he could come out from behind the trees, declaring that no one knew what would happen from that moment on. The MC apologized for his bad manners and said he wanted to ask the Sword Saint for a favor. However, to our surprise, he started laughing. The Sword Saint asked if he hadn't followed him in such a careless way on purpose, so that he would notice. However, the one most surprised in this situation was the MC. He had no weapon or anything of the sort with him, yet the Sword Saint was already holding a sword, almost as if he were about to attack. This made no sense. Was it just because he had followed him? The Sword Saint began to say that he was a good actor, as expected of a first-class assassin. The MC was confused. The Sword Saint had already found a reason to kill him without even mentioning his grandchildren. The MC said he didn't understand what was happening, but the Sword Saint stated that he had been pretending until now, so he couldn't fool him. Gongja continued, saying he truly didn't understand what he was talking about, because how could he look like a first-class assassin? In fact, he was quite proud of looking like an ordinary person. However, the Sword Saint drew his sword and told him to be quiet. He declared that he possessed several abilities, and among them, one that showed how many times a person had committed murder. Then the MC realized that, as explained, murder is murder. He couldn't have known that the person he killed would become a monster, but there was no time to explain that in this timeline. He thought the Sword Saint was seeing the #1 above his head. The MC began to say that even though it might sound like he was making excuses, he had done this act for a good reason. However, the Sword Saint merely remained silent and said he was disgusting, because a demon like him, who had killed countless people, wanted to invent reasons to favor himself now. The Sword Saint hadn't lived a particularly honest life either, but at least he hadn't committed as many mass murders as the MC. The MC wasn't understanding anything. What did he mean by mass murders when he had only killed one person? The Sword Saint said that the MC was now a disgrace to society, as the number of people he had killed so far was 4,091. Hearing this, the MC realized that he had only killed Yu Suha once, but he had killed himself 4,090 times to reach the past. However, currently, in the eyes of that old man, he was merely a serial killer who had murdered 4,091 people. From that moment on, this was no longer about copying his abilities. As long as the Sword Saint possessed that ability, no matter how many times they met, the Sword Saint would always try to kill him. The Sword Saint tried to attack the MC, but he dodged. However, the Sword Saint was still convinced that the MC was a first-class assassin, and that's why he managed to dodge. Meanwhile, the MC was in trouble. The moment he was focused on dodging the attacks, he tripped on a stone which made him fall to the ground. Obviously, the first time the MC dodged the attack was pure luck, but this time he wouldn't be able to dodge. However, before the Sword Saint delivered his final blow, he told him to shut up. The MC realized that the Sword Saint was talking to himself again, and thought it was some kind of schizophrenic attack right in the middle of the battle. However, this could be one of his abilities, or perhaps even telepathy. He had already heard rumors that such abilities existed, so probably the Sword Saint was talking to someone about the number of deaths displayed above his head. But this was bad, because then he would also be a wanted man, not only by the Hunters Association, but also hunted by the great guilds and top bounty hunters. In the end, he would simply be publicly executed on the first floor of the tower. But he couldn't let that happen, and had to die now, before 24 hours passed. At that very moment, the MC stood up and asked the Sword Saint if his grandchildren were all right. He added that he had heard his family was a good family in Northern Europe, and that such families weren't very easy to deal with. The outside world was a very dangerous place, and by some chance, if someone accidentally discovered that he was the Sword Saint, what did he think would happen to his grandchildren? And of course, at that very instant, the MC saw the world upside down. He realized he hadn't even seen the last attack and, once again, wished he could be like him. He was very envious, as he also wanted to have that beautiful attack. Thus, once again, the MC died. Again, they went to the same strange empty space with a window in front of him. This system was creating his ability cards, and he was anxious because he would have the abilities of the two top rankers. He would only take one as a reward, as he did with the Flame Emperor, but looking at the cards in front of him, he realized there were no golden cards. The MC was obviously shocked because, unlike the Flame Emperor, the legend of the Sword Saint, Marcus Callenberry, evolved without any S-rank abilities. Gongja fell to his knees in shock. He wondered if there was some kind of overpowered ability among those silver cards. There were only 3 bronze cards and 4 silver cards. Ignoring the worst cards, which were the bronze ones, he would have a 1 in 4 chance. Among them was that kill counting ability, and he obviously didn't want it. He wanted a very strong combat-oriented ability, so he grabbed a silver card with all his might. Of course, after selecting the card, he went back 24 hours in time and suddenly woke up in his room again. Quickly, he opened his status window and wondered if he had obtained the Sword Saint's main ability. It was a passive ability again, but at least it was A+ rank and didn't seem to be the kill counter. He lay on his bed complaining that he wanted a cool ability, like martial arts or aura awakenings. He opened the ability card again, specifically the one he had taken from the Sword Saint, and its name was Sword Throne. From the name, he couldn't understand what it did. However, suddenly someone asked what that noise was. Looking to the side, the MC became a bit confused, as there seemed to be some kind of specter talking to him. He told it to shut up and be quiet, as they would train soon. While the specter was speaking, the MC politely excused himself and asked who it was. The specter asked the MC if he could see and hear it, and Gongja replied that it was obvious since they were talking. The specter was a bit surprised, as that wasn't how things were supposed to work. It started wondering where Marcus was. The MC asked if it was talking about Marcus Callenberry, the Sword Saint, and the specter said that, although that title was an exaggeration, he was indeed talking about him. It asked the MC if he knew where he was, because since the MC was there, the old man was probably nearby. The MC started wondering what on earth that specter was, and looking at the ability he had taken from the Sword Saint, realized that this ghost was, in fact, a being from another world who had completed 99 stages of the tower, but failed the 100th. The MC asked the ghost if it was the Sword Saint's guardian spirit, and the ghost replied that it probably was. The MC, somewhat shocked, said that unintentionally, he had accidentally stolen it from the old man. Hearing this, the ghost was obviously shocked. It started crying, complaining that since the MC had copied the ability, he could also cancel it, and asked if he didn't know how to reverse it since nowadays, when you take something wrong, you can return it. But the MC was also shocked by the whole situation. He didn't know what to do, and said that his ability wasn't something he could control. The ghost was almost falling into depression because it had been stolen by a loser. It started spouting a lot of nonsense at the MC, saying it had warned the old man to walk the right path. The MC asked if it could at least live in silence, and the spirit, mocking him, said there was no way to live in silence since it was dead. The MC, already furious, said that it should die in silence then. The ghost started talking more and more, saying that besides being dead, it it had been stolen and was now being mistreated by someone in a bad mood who had no shame. The MC wondered what kind of ghost talks so much like that. However, he remembered the Sword Saint, who was always complaining and suddenly telling people to shut up. The MC was somewhat shocked, because now he not only had to hide from the Sword Saint, but had also acquired a truly annoying ability. The ghost asked why he wanted to hide from the old man, because it might not seem like it, but he was a nice guy, and of course he just couldn't talk about his grandchildren. The MC replied that he already knew that, and that he also had a death counter. The MC reiterated that he knew this and that his number was 4091. The ghost, hearing this, asked the MC if he had gone crazy, because he was a complete amateur among amateurs and didn't even know how to use aura. So how on earth did he manage to kill 4091 people? The MC explained to the ghost that in reality, he hadn't killed 4091 people. He had only killed one who would become a tyrant in the future, and the truth was that he had killed himself 4090 times and ended up going back 11 years into the past simply to kill that guy. He had a copy ability, which allowed him to steal any ability from anyone who killed him, and coincidentally, he ended up receiving the power to go back in time when he was killed by that guy. Every time the MC dies, he returns 24 hours in time, starting from the moment of his death. Technically, he was immortal. He wanted to get back at him, but this guy was rank 1 and couldn't be killed due to his resurrection ability. That's why he ended up going back to the time before abilities awakened. The ghost questioned, asking if he had traveled back in time just to get revenge on one person, and for that feat, he simply committed suicide for 11 years. The atmosphere between them grew tense. The ghost asked the MC his name, and he replied that it was Kim Gongja. He asked another question. Why had he decided to provoke the old man, and why had he stolen his ability right after his revenge? The MC simply replied, because he was number 1, and the fastest way to get strong is by taking the abilities of the strongest. The ghost looked at him and said that the reason he was being honest was because no one else could hear the information about the ability he had just spoken of, as no one could sense or see him. The MC simply confirmed his answer. At that moment, the ghost asked him to stand up and began to observe the MC, realizing that his body was quite good and only needed some exercises here and there, and that he was also very ambitious. In the end, he realized the MC wasn't so bad and wanted to make a request. He wanted him to hunt some monsters for him. Transitioning to the tower, the MC asked the ghost if he only wanted him to kill slimes, and the ghost confirmed. At that very instant, the MC cut the slime, but it grew even larger and enveloped Gongja's body. However, he remained very calm and quickly got out of the slime's body. The ghost said that was what he had truly seen. The MC asked what he was talking about, and the ghost began to explain that when he was alive, he was known as the Sword Emperor. He had been born in a different world, and a tower also appeared in his world, which he quickly ascended to the top of. The MC realized that this ghost was truly insane, because the Flame Emperor only reached the 40th floor, while he had managed to reach the 99th floor. The ghost added that upon reaching his level, he could see a person's talent just by looking at them. For this reason, he wanted him to hunt to observe his abilities. Hearing that, the MC was somewhat disappointed, saying that he had wasted his time and had no talent for fighting. The ghost asked what nonsense he was talking about. He did have talent, and a very significant one, in fact. The MC questioned if he was joking, but the ghost added that of course he had no talent for martial arts, because his movements were clumsy, his body wasn't trained, and he wasn't even close to sensing his aura. However, he possessed a talent that no one else had, the fear of death. People usually protect themselves instinctively when fighting, but the MC was the opposite. He had probably lost that fear after dying over 4,000 times. The MC questioned if that could be considered a type of talent, and the ghost confirmed it. For him, the definition of talent wasn't something like immeasurable power. In fact, anyone could gain talent during their life, and one of the most difficult to obtain was overcoming the fear of death. That alone was incredible. The MC noted that no one had ever told him that, not even himself. Gongja couldn't stand being treated like an insect by the Flame Emperor. He couldn't bear it to the point that he killed himself 4,090 times, and in the end, death, something everyone fears, ended up becoming his talent. The ghost asked the MC something. Since he had stolen the old man's ability, that meant he had died to him, and he wanted to know what he thought when the old man killed him. The MC replied that the moon and that cut were very beautiful. At that moment, the ghost began to laugh incessantly and said that the MC was very interesting. He added that if his ability was copy, then that meant there was another version of him as the spiritual guardian of the Sword Saint. Therefore, he wanted to see which of the two would become the best hunter. To find out the result, he would help him. He would help him to the point where he could defeat the old man, or rather, to the point where he would be above him, and also conquer all those floors of the tower. The next day, the ghost was nagging the MC to wake up. He should wake up soon, as the old man was probably on the 10th floor while he was sleeping. If he didn't wake up, he would sing a song for him. The MC got up, a bit annoyed, questioning if he didn't know the time. It was only 4 in the morning. The ghost replied that even insects start crawling at 4 in the morning, but the MC retorted that it was no excuse, as the ghost was only doing this because he couldn't sleep. Gongja added that he now understood why the Sword Saint trained at such crazy hours. It certainly wasn't by choice, but out of sheer exhaustion. The ghost then told the MC he should be grateful and kneel. The MC declared he would kill him, but the ghost just laughed, saying he was already dead so the MC couldn't kill him. Since the MC MC was so angry, he just needed to kill himself as he couldn't kill the ghost. However, he couldn't even do that, because he would simply return in time. The ghost then declared that the MC's nickname from now on would be Zombie. Outside, the MC was doing his daily run when the ghost began to comment that, besides his perseverance, the MC had no other talent. He'd prefer to start teaching him the basics, but even there, the MC was inferior. For some reason, his level was below basic, yet in terms of potential, he was like a limitless black hole, which meant he needed special assistance. To achieve this, he would need to pay for some high-level torture. The ghost then declared it was time for them to win some money in the lottery. You might be wondering where they'd win this money, given they were inside the tower. In fact, there was a guild called Sang Ryun, though its official name was the Merchants Union. The master of this guild was the rank 3 hunter, known as the Countess, and she was the only one with an ability to conduct exchanges with the outside world. Thanks to this ability, the Sang Ryun guild held a monopoly on the tower's economy, and, as a result, became the only place in all of Babylon where one could bet on the lottery. The MC arrived and placed his coupon on the counter, stating he had come to collect his winnings. The clerk congratulated the MC for finally winning their guild's lottery. The ghost, somewhat curious, asked if the MC knew why they always wore cat ears, and Gongja replied that he'd heard their guildmaster was a catwoman. The clerk questioned the MC if he had checked the date, as it wasn't possible to collect a prize from a ticket purchased over 2 years ago. The MC replied that he had bought this one last week. After that, the clerk examined the ticket and was shocked, as the MC had won the first-place lottery prize. Everyone behind the MC was surprised. The clerk, somewhat confused, said he would confirm the number and call the manager immediately. The ghost questioned the MC if he wasn't afraid of being robbed in an alley, or something similar with that amount of money. Gongja replied that before he returned to this time, Yu Suha had used this ability to win the lottery several times, so he had learned a few things. It wasn't something that could be hidden, even if he tried. Even if it were revealed, it was better to have everything explained. If a winner were attacked, the Sang Ryun guild would suffer the worst consequences. At that very moment, the guild manager, Arthur Tyler, arrived. He was also known as the Vault Guardian. The MC joked with him, saying his nickname suited the guild. Normally, an F rank like Gongja could never associate with someone of high rank, but today was different because he was now a client worth 50,000 gold. The ghost began to mock the MC, saying he was easily swayed, getting impressed by mere treatment, and embarrassed when his talent was mentioned yesterday. In his thoughts, the MC wanted to kill the ghost. The ghost declared that the MC shouldn't be so easily influenced. He should believe that everyone in the world existed to be trampled upon by them. In his thoughts, Gongja mused that anyone with Emperor in their name was a psychopath, and he never wanted to be like them. Arthur questioned the MC if he was having any problems, and the MC denied it, saying he was just a bit unfocused. Arthur said he was relieved, as he had been wondering if someone had treated him poorly before he arrived. The MC began to wonder in his thoughts if Arthur was some kind of angel. A short while later, they arrived at the VIP room, and the prize before the MC was what he had won, 53,000 gold. Seeing such a large sum, the MC couldn't help but swallow hard, as where he came from, all that gold was equivalent to about $5 million. With all that money, he could live comfortably for the rest of his life. His goal was to succeed, and he had already achieved it. However, he had decided to reign in this tower as a hunter. How he acquired this money was just a small step, and he had already seen much more impressive gold than that. The MC told Arthur that he should keep the money in the safe, and this was a wise choice, as it was what he recommended to many winners. Even if he managed to carry the money with him, there were many bad people in the world. Because of this, Gongja wanted to purchase an honorary membership title from the Sang Hyun Guild. Arthur asked the MC if he wasn't part of any guild, and the MC denied it. The ghost said that the MC was truly smart, because a guild wasn't just a group of friends or hunters. The biggest reason people joined guilds was because they wanted to be protected. On the first floor of the tower, there were guards and the Hunters Association, but the city was too wild to trust those two organizations. This could be seen by how the Flame Emperor and the Sword Saint killed the MC. The Flame Emperor never affiliated with a guild, and always prided himself on his freedom. He probably won the lottery many times, but never paid a protection fee to anyone. Someone at his level refusing to join guilds probably really annoyed others, and that was why he was almost poisoned. The MC told Arthur that he wanted one more thing. He wanted a cheap room for one person, and also, if any newspaper asked who the prize winner was, he could say it was an anonymous honorary member of the Sang Hyun Guild. Arthur remained silent at the MC's words and said that he was well prepared. The MC simply said that the world was a dangerous place, so he had to be ready for what was to come. The ghost said that the MC was doing very well on his own, and he had thought he even needed his diapers changed at first. However, at that moment, he seemed quite happy. The MC said it was obvious, but this was just the beginning. 4,000 deaths, 4,000 days to go back in time. He couldn't savor this before, as he was focused on his revenge. However, now it was time to enjoy all that power. Outside the Merchant Guild, the ghost reminded the MC that hunts were the most important parts of his lessons, and now that he had enough to pay for them, he asked what the next step would be. The MC replied that perhaps he should find a competent teacher. The ghost retorted to the MC, saying that he already had one right in front of him. However, the ghost added that books, scrolls to teach martial arts, or potions to improve physical abilities were needed. However, at the MC's level, he wouldn't be able to learn anything just by reading scrolls. So the only things he could manage to do were potions, and very good ones at that. The MC began to wonder how good they should be, and the ghost thought for a moment and said they should be from a place called the Alchemy Castle because there were many healers there. Gongja said that the potions there were extremely expensive, but the ghost said that now he had a lot of money and shouldn't be stingy. He just needed to make a deal, and perhaps he could get a discount. While running to the location, the ghost suddenly stopped and told the MC that he should hide because he had forgotten to mention the shop they were going to. The old man also bought potions there. The MC was asked why he hadn't said that before, as he should have cut off that kind of thing from the beginning. Suddenly, the Sword Saint stopped and looked towards where the MC was, and Gongja was already in shock, wondering what he should do. Should he simply run? However, the Sword Saint merely turned away. The ghost said that was terrible because if the old man was there, it meant he would buy all the potions, and he told the MC to leave faster. Arriving in front of the shop, they realized the old man had entered it, and the ghost began to say that the training was over there because that shop was the best in the area, and the old man would probably take all the potions. The MC realized in his thoughts that it would be too risky to use the same shop as the Sword Saint. However, he wanted to take a different path. Looking at his phone, he noticed that neither the top 100 nor the top 300 were listed there. Suddenly, the MC said that maybe he wouldn't have to spend as much money as he had mentioned before, and they could get very good potions for a very cheap price. A short while later, the MC was in a type of slum where everyone was giving him dirty looks. The ghost questioned the MC if there was really a decent alchemist around there. The MC replied that she wasn't just decent, but a genius who only appears once every generation. Obviously, the ghost said the MC was crazy, because how could a genius live in a place like that? While the ghost was speaking, people were again giving the MC dirty looks, but in reality, that wasn't it. They were trying to see if it was worth robbing the MC, but they gave up because they saw him talking to himself, and perhaps thought he was crazy. As they were walking through the slum, they heard the voices of a woman screaming, and the MC said they had probably arrived at the right place. The girl was screaming that if they took her equipment, she simply wouldn't be able to survive. The man told her to take everything they found there, and the girl tried to grab the cart with her belongings, but the man sped up, causing her to fall. The bald man told her it was better for her to work on something else. People were complaining that her potions were too expensive, but the girl retorted that they weren't expensive at all. She barely made any profit from them. She declared that finding potions of the same quality and price throughout all of Babylon was impossible, and therefore, they should be grateful that she had opened that shop in a trashy place like that. However, people simply ignored her and left. She asked if they weren't going to buy any potions since they were there, and everyone replied that they wouldn't buy anything from a rude person like her. Seeing that, the ghost questioned the MC if that loser in front of them was the generational genius he had spoken about, but the MC asked if he was blind. Then he approached her and questioned if her shop was still open. Obviously, this woman wasn't a crazy alchemist or a loser. She was simply the master alchemist, an alchemist who would reach level 5 in the future and become the leader of the Alchemy Castle. The girl said she was open and could make any potion he needed, and questioned the MC about which product he wanted to buy. The MC said he wanted a product worth around 20,000 gold, and this obviously shocked the girl. Well, Gongja had all this in mind. If he could form connections with the high ranks to reach the top, it would simply become his golden goose, and for that reason, he would become her #1 client. A short while later, the girl led him to her shop, and upon arriving there, they noticed everything was messy. The ghost started questioning the MC again if he really wanted potions made by her. The girl asked the MC again if he would really give 20,000 gold. The MC believed that if she was truly doubting him, he would pay in advance. The girl said that if possible, an advance payment would be very good. The MC realized she was so broke she couldn't even maintain good manners, and he told her to take the money from his safe. He would notify the Sanghyun Guild. She asked if she could really take as much as she needed, and the MC confirmed yes. However, he didn't want to go too far over the original 20,000 gold budget, as his resources weren't unlimited. The girl said that before making any potion, she wanted to say one thing. If the potion he wanted was an illicit drug, she wouldn't make it. The MC realized that even though her shop had just been closed, she still didn't have the courage to refuse thousands of gold. Despite seeming crazy, she fit the role of master alchemist very well. The MC told her to relax, as he wouldn't ask for any drugs or anything of the sort. The girl then asked what type of potion he wanted to order. The ghost said she didn't seem that skilled yet, but he would provide the recipe. So they told the girl the ingredients one by one, and she wrote them down until the end. When the ghost finished listing the ingredients, the girl said that it would produce a potion to increase reaction time, and that the recipe was of an extremely high level. The ghost was surprised and confirmed that was it. The girl became excited and started rambling about optimism and blah blah blah. The MC and the ghost realized that this type of specialist truly existed. The MC interrupted her, asking how long it would take to make everything, and the girl replied that it would be about 4 days. She started to explain the reason. However, the MC recalled in his thoughts that, in his previous life, getting a potion made by her and her guild would take months or even years to receive. He told the girl that 4 days was nothing. As they were leaving, the ghost said he still didn't approve of the girl, as she might only be good with words and perhaps a swindler. However, the MC didn't mind, and asked where he had gotten that recipe. The ghost explained that it was a potion he had created himself, the best recipe he managed to devise after consuming all sorts of potions. The MC started to tease him, saying that she had praised his recipe as extremely high level, and added that even if he didn't trust her now, 10 years from now, she would be the head of the alchemy castle. The ghost didn't believe it, and said she would probably take his money and run away. 4 days later, he was there with all the ingredients and the potions he had ordered. She then handed 3 boxes to the MC, with 30 potions in each. The MC stated that that quantity of potions would be worth 30 days of work, but in his thoughts, he realized this was 15 times more efficient than buying from the shop suggested by the guardian spirit. However, while he was thinking this, the girl caught the MC's attention and questioned why he had placed such a valuable order with an unknown alchemist like her. Even though she was confident in her skill, just by looking at that recipe, she realized that only 2 people in all of Babylon could make it. The MC himself had seen that all those people treated her like a madwoman. In his thoughts, the MC said it was because before him stood the most renowned pharmacist of her entire generation. But that wasn't the only reason. It was because she was the one who ran to the city faster than anyone when the fire started, and also someone who hadn't been deceived by the Flame Emperor. And on top of that, she was skilled and kind. Besides having good judgment, it would be a great loss if he didn't get close to someone like her. However, all of this was in his thoughts, and he told her that he helped her because she seemed kind, and also because she would achieve success even without his help. Therefore, he believed that good hunters like them needed to be successful so they could help each other even more in the future, as it was frustrating to see only crazy psychopaths succeed. For that reason, he wished the best for both of them. Everything the MC had said was true, and perhaps he couldn't have been more honest than that. The girl supported the MC's words, saying they should become successful for the good of the world. As he was leaving, the girl added that if he had any more requests, he should let her know at any time, as she would always prioritize his orders. The MC said he was grateful. However, the ghost annoyed him by questioning what he meant by hunters like us. The MC himself admitted he had said something embarrassing, but they should train soon. Now on the 3rd floor of the tower, the MC realized that the monsters ahead of him were truly stronger than him, and he questioned the ghost about what he should do. The ghost simply told him he should drink the potion, and so he did. The MC said the potion's taste was quite normal. It had a hint of lemon and even a taste of honey. However, at that very instant, something began to happen. It felt like the world around him was swaying, and his entire body started to sweat. The ghost told the MC that the girl's skills were indeed good, and he asked the MC what the sensation was like. It felt like every strand of his hair could be counted, and even his sweat seemed alive. This was the potion's effect, and it greatly enhanced the perception of reality. The ghost said that the thing around his heart was aura, and it exists within every hunter who enters the tower. Most of them don't even realize it's there. Learning to control this aura would be a decisive factor against the old man. Normally, one could feel the flow by meditating in that state. However, it would take too long, and since he lacked talent, he at least had to work harder than others. If he didn't want to die, he should run. The moment the monster attacked the MC, he realized the world seemed to slow down. However, even if he could see the attacks, his body didn't respond properly. As he ran, the ghost told the MC that he would be able to dodge, so he shouldn't give up. Orcs are low-level monsters with very simple attack patterns, so it would be easy for him to deal with them once he recognized these patterns, and for that, he should gather aura in his legs. Well, saying that was easy, but if he couldn't even dodge, he wouldn't take a single step towards success. However, he had to do it. Suddenly, his heart started beating faster, and a jolt ran through his entire body. He managed to dodge the orc's attack. The ghost began to say that it was harder than it looked, and that was because he didn't possess the necessary channels for aura to flow through his body. Metaphorically, his body was like a small mountain path, and he needed to transform this small path into an avenue so that aura could flow smoothly. He could only feel the aura now thanks to the potion, as normally he would just be a loser. But as he said this, the MC was giving his all to dodge the attacks. When the MC was almost losing consciousness, he questioned what would happen if he transformed this path into a grand avenue. In his thoughts, this frustrated him because the guardian spirit was indeed right, and the metaphor he had spoken truly fit him, an abandoned path covered in debris. However, if he overcame this, what could happen? The ghost asked the MC if he truly remembered that the old man had killed him without even giving him time to react, and the MC confirmed it. However, the ghost said that anyone could perform that kind of ability, and as he had said before, the old man had a long way to go, while for the MC, he didn't even need to comment. Hearing that, the MC began to grow even more frustrated. However, at that very moment, he dodged the orc and lowered his head. He positioned himself quickly, and the ghost was somewhat surprised, as what the MC had done was truly creative. At the same moment, the MC drew his sword and charged at the orc, attacking it in the next instant. The ghost told the MC that he shouldn't let his guard down, as orcs have very tough skin, so he should concentrate his aura at the tip of the blade. But that would be difficult for him. However, in a very simple explanation, he just had to try to channel all his aura to the tip of the blade. So little by little, the MC infused only the blade, and in the end, he managed to cut the orc and attacked it again and again. After the MC had killed the orc, the ghost asked him if it wasn't hurting. It probably was, since he hadn't even created a decent channel for it and still used aura in that way. He must have been feeling a pain that likely felt like he was going to die. He had ruined his entire body simply trying to take down just one orc. However, despite that final move was very creative, and he praised him for it, as a hunter should always use their head in battle. While the ghost was saying this, the MC was writhing on the ground. The ghost questioned the MC if he felt like he was going to die, because that's exactly what was going to happen. For starters, if it weren't for his return ability, he wouldn't suggest this training method, because even the old man himself meditates after taking that potion. He didn't use his own body as carelessly as the MC did. However, whenever he dies, he'll be able to return, and wasn't that amazing? No matter how tough the training would be, every time he went back in time, his body would return to normal. Since his counter increases every time he kills himself, he would need to use a different method to prevent that from happening. Since he had already understood how to use aura from the start, he would only need 100 more deaths to understand enough. Again, the MC died, and there he was again in that empty space. However, beside him was also the ghost, who wondered what kind of place that was. The MC explained to him that for now, that place would be called Purgatory, and soon the system would probably send a message that he would return 24 hours in time, just like with the Flame Emperor and the Sword Saint. However, the system announced that the conditions for his skill had been met, so it would copy a random skill from the orc. Seeing this, neither of them understood anything. The MC started shouting, asking if monsters even had skills, and the ghost said that his skill was incredibly overpowered. The ghost began to say that this broke all hunter standards, but meanwhile, the MC stated he would take any skill since it wasn't worth much anyway. The ghost questioned him, asking if he would really take that skill, and the MC replied that it wasn't very important which skill he chose. Again, the ghost questioned why he didn't pick the best option, but the MC responded that he couldn't choose, and judging by their colors, both were quite bad. The ghost was confused, saying he didn't understand how the MC couldn't see which one was better, and the MC explained that their colors were the same. He could only see their backs, so how could he tell which skill was better? However, the ghost said he could see behind them, and hearing that, the MC became confused because the skill cards always moved so that their backs were facing him, and they remained that way even if he tried to turn his head for a look. However, since the guardian spirit could fly freely, he could see both sides of the card. Realizing this, the MC became very happy and suddenly let out a shout. The MC simply told him to quickly reveal what the two skills were. Card number 1 displayed the Blessing of Reproduction, and card number 2 showed Tweak. Seeing the descriptions of both skills, the MC was shocked. The ghost said the Tweak skill was very cool, but he could have an orc skill, and regardless, the MC stated that Tweak was better than the Blessing of Reproduction, so he would take it. However, the ghost tried to stop the MC, yet it seemed they were both thinking the same thing, and still, the MC chose that skill. The MC returned 24 hours in time again, and was happy to wake up in the room the Merchant Guild had arranged for him. Meanwhile, the ghost was complaining that he thought he would fall for that, but the MC told him to stop complaining and go train immediately. Then he opened his status window and noticed the skill was there. The ghost tried to convince the MC that perhaps it would be better to train in the lotus position, as it would be less painful than fighting orcs. However, the MC didn't listen to what he said, and once again headed to the 3rd floor. Once more, he took the potion and set off towards the orc, and as always, the world seemed a bit slow to him. Suddenly, the MC stopped and used his Tweak skill. Hearing that, the orc became somewhat confused, and without wasting time, the MC attacked it, thus defeating the orc. The ghost began to complain that the MC was truly using a hack, and that it didn't count for training, and asked if he had no feelings for deceiving that poor orc in such a way, without even considering their feelings. However, the MC didn't care about that. A week later, the MC was already on the 5th floor, facing the boss of that area, who was the Goblin King. At that very moment, he activated his skill called High Society Goblin, and it startled the Goblin King. However, he quickly attacked and thus finished off the boss. The MC declared that he had been the strongest enemy he had faced that week, and wished him to rest in peace. But the ghost told him to stop lying, and stop being so overly emotional about defeating a single monster. The MC said he had managed to defeat this boss after 6 coins. To explain, 1 coin meant 1 life. The ghost added that he was a liar, and that was a proven fact. Furthermore, he couldn't say that battle had been honorable, as he had used the High Society Goblin skill, which only high-ranking goblins could utilize. However, the MC was surprised that goblins cared about useless things like hierarchy. Suddenly, the MC received a system message stating that his existence was much more defined, and for that reason, he would level up. As a reward, he received 2 more skill slots and became an E-rank hunter. The MC was happy about this. However, the ghost was wondering if those were sparks or drops of blood. The MC asked if that wasn't an effect of leveling up, and the ghost confirmed it was, but it wasn't just to make him look pretty. It was a kind of hint, because it's possible to discover the form of your aura according to the effects that appear when you level up. For example, the Flame Emperor he had killed probably had a fire-based aura. Any hunter's aura takes shape after some trauma, but not always a bad memory. However, it is always based on a life-defining moment or event, and this reflects in the form of their aura. It's more like an effect of one's own subconscious. From what the effect showed, the MC's aura was likely fire or blood. The MC asked the ghost what the Sword Saint's aura looked like, and the ghost replied that his aura was like moonlight. When he was a small boy, he got lost in the mountains and didn't want to die. So he climbed to the top of one of them and said the light from the illuminated sky was absolutely beautiful. The moon doesn't shine with its own strength, but by reflecting the sun, and he wished within himself that he wanted to shine like the moon, or so he thought when he was 12 years old, and he carried that thought with him ever since. But cutting to the chase, the ghost said it was time to go to the 6th floor. The MC asked if they couldn't go straight to the 10th floor boss. The ghost questioned if he wasn't getting ahead of himself, even as a novice, and the MC replied that wasn't it. He said that if he couldn't clear the 10th floor with 2 coins, he promised he would call the ghost Master. The ghost asked how he would defeat the boss with only a single death. The MC said he didn't care, but had one condition. The ghost needed to reveal the exact skills of the 10th floor boss. Furthermore, if the MC won, the ghost would have to call him Gongja Nim, a more polite form of address. The MC then asked if the ghost would give up, or if he was that weak. The ghost said the MC was getting too cocky by trying to pick a fight against the Sword Emperor, and told the MC to be well prepared, because from that point on, he would start calling him Master for the rest of his life. However, the MC was unfazed, stating that he would be the one serving someone, and the two laughed at each other. However, to outsiders, the MC was simply laughing by himself. Upon reaching the 10th floor, the guards told the MC he couldn't enter and questioned him why. The guard simply said that the MC wanted to commit an act of suicide by facing the boss alone, and asked if he hadn't seen the news about the Black Dragon Guild, which entered with 34 of its elite members and still failed. However, the MC didn't care, stating that according to association rules, any solo hunter could start a raid. The guard retorted, saying he had to keep a record of everyone who entered there, and his superiors would look at him later. He would feel heavy-hearted if he allowed someone to kill themselves. The MC began to wonder what he would do. Then he started telling the guard that he appreciated his work, and what he was saying was truly accurate. To be honest, he really wanted to commit suicide. Neither the guard nor the ghost understood what the MC was talking about. He began to tell a story. He had recently lost his beloved, and the Alchemy Castle had told him he had an incurable disease with at most 6 months left to live, so he could no longer live. Even without his health, he was still a hunter, and he didn't want to spend the rest of his life confined to a bed in the Alchemy Castle. He wanted to use the remainder of his life to challenge a monster. Hearing those words, the soldier felt moved. The MC even handed him a pouch of money, saying that it was the money he had saved for his treatment. The MC added that he already wanted to disappear from this world. He wanted to leave it without leaving anything behind, and this was his last request as a hunter. The guard said he could go ahead because he hadn't seen anything, and even the ghost was moved, asking if they were idiots in making a movie. Thus, they crossed the gate. Now, at the official location of the 10th floor, it was a floor that should have been cleared by the Flame Emperor. However, this time the MC would write a legend greater than the Flame Emperor's. So the MC opened the mansion door, and inside were several dolls laughing at each other, asking if he would play with all of them. At that very moment, the MC activated his skill and declared he would play with them. Well, let's go back in time a bit to where the Black Dragon Guild, which had secured its position as the strongest since the tower's opening, had unfortunately failed the raid for the 30th time. Reporters asked them what they thought caused this failure, and the guildmaster said there was nothing wrong with their skills. Rather, they had a bit of bad luck. However, someone was there to bother them. It was the Flame Emperor who had cleared the 10th floor. Of course, in the future, this interview became known as the Loser's Declaration. You might be wondering how the Flame Emperor was the only one who managed to clear the 10th floor. Firstly, clearing the 10th floor is relatively simple. The boss was hidden somewhere in the mansion, and you just needed to find the right doll and destroy it. No matter how much one protected themselves with their own aura, 10 minutes was the time limit anyone could endure those flames. However, this had no effect on fire-type aura users, which is why he managed to clear it safely, and even had the audacity to say that luck was also a skill. The ghost even joked with the MC, saying that he also survived by luck. At that moment, the MC said his aura wouldn't last long, and the ghost approached him, stating that he would last about 1 minute at most. He added that, just for the record, the old man could endure those flames for over 30 minutes, and was now training to extend that time to 1 hour before challenging the boss. Unlike someone who had gone in without a plan, the ghost questioned if the MC could really defeat that floor with just 2 coins. The MC told him to be quiet, as now, after the first death, he would think of something. The ghost questioned, saying that the MC thought he could initially expand his aura without dying there. Even if he tried, there were only 2 ways to clear that place. The first was to find the right doll, a 1 in a million chance, or to become so proficient with his aura that it could last long enough to find the correct doll. For this reason, he would certainly lose if he only used 2 coins to clear that floor. However, the MC retorted, saying that the ghost was forgetting about option 3, and because of that, they would see who would win after he died. As the MC's aura was probably already running out, he randomly picked up a doll. However, when he touched the doll, it began to crumble. They really had to do that, shatter a doll right in front of him. The ghost said that no one could understand what would happen in the tower, and that the tower was probably controlled by a psychopath, as it had given a stolen ability to trash much like him. Suddenly, the MC's aura ran out and he was engulfed by the fire. He obviously died, and his envy skill activated again, beginning to copy the skills of the infernal dolls. The ghost quickly went for the golden skill card and said it was incredible. Its name was Infernal Fire Barrier, rank S. In short, it summoned an infernal fire within a 2-kilometer radius, and no one could escape this fire without the user's permission. The ghost even joked with the MC, saying that now he would truly become the king of purgatory. However, the MC was thinking as he felt something was wrong. This skill was definitely very strong, but something wasn't right. Because of this, he asked the ghost to read the other skills. He read them one by one until he reached the last one, and at that very instant, he was shocked. Even without hearing the skill's description, the MC said he had found the answer he was looking for. Again, the ghost was shocked, saying that the MC had understood what kind of skill it was. However, he should choose the golden card. It was extremely powerful. If he used it, suddenly a lot of fire would appear and kill everyone around. In his thoughts, the MC really wanted this golden card. However, he felt there was something strange, because among the tens of thousands of dolls, there was only one true one, and the true one wouldn't burn, as it possessed a fire aura. However, why weren't the fake skills burning either? He only had one answer for this. They probably had a skill that would help the summoner select targets so they wouldn't burn themselves. Again, the MC went back 24 hours in time, but currently, he was an E-rank hunter, and because of this, he would receive a penalty for using the skill. He would receive a trauma from the opponent by whom he had been killed, and the trauma of the infernal dolls monster was recreated. The trauma began with a small child asking for a piece of bread, even if it was just crumbs. However, people always refused his request. Wherever he went, people always complained about him, and many wondered where so many homeless children like him came from. While walking, he ended up bumping into an old man. He started apologizing, thinking he was going to get hit, but the man merely stroked his head and asked if he had no peace, and that he seemed hungry and suffering, his body appearing to be in pain all over. He asked the child to come with him, saying he was a doctor and had many friends at home for the child to play with. However, that was what the child thought it would be. While inside a kind of cage, the child asked the man when they could go out to play, feeling very hungry. The man simply told the child to have a little more patience, adding that only animals succumb to their own desires. Just because he was born a beast didn't mean he had to be raised like one. He knew very well, orphans like him didn't work, claiming they were too young and spread diseases from village to village. He was a good man who had a duty to get rid of children like them. Suddenly, the scene cut to a type of slave auction, where people took these orphan children and sacrificed them, using the good of the village as a pretext. It was more like a bloodthirsty cult. People commented that the number of sacrifices was decreasing, and so they needed to find more children for the next ritual. The child wondered where the kind gentleman was taking their friends and wanted to know why they kept getting hurt, and the ghost began to wonder what kind of thing this was. The MC said that they were probably two spirits now. However, the ghost said that wasn't important. He was questioning who the MC was telling to repent. The MC replied that this was probably the origin of the 10th floor boss. The MC continued, saying he didn't know that floor bosses were once human, and the ghost replied that, previously, not all of them were monsters. These bosses are based on real-life events from different worlds. Some are even heroes and life forms from other worlds. This would become increasingly frequent starting from the 11th floor. The MC questioned why the ghost hadn't said this before, and the ghost replied that the MC hadn't asked. Also, this was the first time he had seen the origin of a place. He knew it was from another world, but he couldn't figure out exactly what had happened. Now it was completely different to see it with his own eyes. The MC wondered if such things happened somewhere in all worlds. Suddenly, the house caught fire, and the landlord and servants began to flee. The MC stopped them, saying it wasn't time to run, as the children were in the basement. All of them were in shock, wondering if there was no one there, and it was getting very hot. In the end, they still called for help from the kind gentleman. They began to question what they had done wrong. They just didn't want to starve and only wanted to play with their friends. They just wanted to have fun and live a happy life. That's how the trauma of the infernal dolls ended. The ghost fell silent for a moment and said that the situation was truly sad, but they couldn't do anything now. The MC asked if that was the ghost's first thought after seeing that, and the ghost confirmed he had a bad personality. But what could he expect? That's how the real world worked. That boss was just a monster now, and those children from the origin had been dead for a long time. What could the MC do about it? Therefore, he should just find the true doll and kill it, then proceed to the 11th floor, 20th, 30th, 40th, 50th. That's what he should do now if he decided to climb the tower. That was probably how the Flame Emperor had thought as well. The MC said that Yusuha would surely find the true doll and kill it, and he would do the same without hesitation if he had seen their trauma. However, the MC wouldn't be like him. The ghost asked the MC what he was going to do. Act like a child and not clear the floor just to avoid being like him? If he wanted to defeat that floor, he should kill the boss. The MC said that wasn't the only way to clear the floor and told the ghost he was stupid, as everything was right under his nose, and he hadn't even noticed. He asked the ghost if he remembered that S-rank skill he wanted him to choose. The ghost said he remembered, and the MC began to say, grudge, resentment, and regret as described in the skill referred to endless rancor. Their resentment would never be heard, and their desires never achieved. Burn everything. As long as you wish for it, an infernal fire will always appear within a 2-kilometer radius, and no one could leave this hell without your permission, no matter who they are. This was the description of the S-rank skill. The MC asked the ghost if he didn't think something was wrong. The ghost questioned what he was talking about and what was wrong with the skill. However, the MC was referring to the final part. No one could leave hell without permission, no matter who they were. The MC even asked, so how did the Black Dragon Guild manage to escape without killing the boss? There was only one answer to that. The boss probably allowed them to leave. This was a floor that humanity had not yet cleared, and there was only one thing the boss wanted from its visitors. At that very moment, the MC activated his skill and began walking through the fire. The dolls started wondering if he wasn't burning, and even asked the MC if he wanted to play with them. The MC confirmed he did, and the game would be hide and seek. It was even a bit ironic to play this, as it was a part of hide and seek where the children couldn't go anywhere. However, this was the answer the MC found. So he went touching the dolls one by one, and we could see a glimpse of the children's spirits trapped within them. The ghost realized what the MC was doing. He was appeasing their spirits. So he kept touching each of the dolls until he reached the last one, which was trapped inside a cage. The doll asked him if he would play with her, and the MC picked it up, saying it was her turn. Suddenly, the doll began to melt, and the child's spirit thanked him, saying, "Thank you very much, kind sir." This was the ending the MC chose. Thus, he cleared the 10th floor, and his rewards would be given 24 hours after entering the 11th floor. The ghost asked the MC why he had that expression, as clearing a secret stage wasn't something just anyone could do, and yet he did it on his first try. However, the MC said it wasn't that. He realized the world was truly trash, both in the boss scene and in situations that happen regardless of the world they are in. After that, an awkward silence fell. However, the ghost let out a shout, saying that kind of situation didn't suit him, and he patted the MC, saying he was impressed and that he had cleared the floors in his own way. He added that this time, he cleared a floor with pure skill, without any luck. Fireworks began to appear in the sky, and an announcement was made. The 11th floor would open in 24 hours. People started wondering what had happened and what those fireworks were. These fireworks were visible on all 10 floors of the tower. They realized that someone had probably cleared the floor and wondered if it was the Black Dragon Guild. However, they noticed it wasn't them, because the Black Dragon Guild was on the first floor having coffee, and the others were also in completely different locations. People wanted to know who had cleared this floor. Of course, the ghost wouldn't miss this opportunity, and asked the MC how it felt to be a main character while being a Zenigame. The MC replied that it felt very good, almost as if it wasn't him. However, the ghost told him not to get too excited, as he had only cleared the 10th floor. But he was the closest person to the top, and the MC knew it. At that very moment, the guard arrived, shouting at the MC and questioning if he had done that, as he was the only one entering the floor that day, and now all his bosses were calling him, asking what was happening. However, the MC just patted him and told him to relax. The guard asked for his name or a nickname so he could tell his superiors. However, the MC didn't want to say, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't have a nickname. The ghost said the MC did well, as it's better to train in hiding than to show off to others, but we already know what the ghost meant by that. The MC said he realized something, that now the ghost had to call him Gongjanim and even teased him, saying he thought he really couldn't clear a floor with 2 coins. The ghost tried to reason with him, saying they were friends, comrades, brothers. However, the MC didn't care and said that now he should use the suffix nim if he wanted to speak with him. Soon after, rumors were already spreading throughout the tower floors. Some thought it had been the Sword Saint. The MC began to wonder if the ghost thought victory wasn't good to appreciate. He started tapping his ear, asking if his earphones were broken since he wasn't hearing any response. Of course, for those who don't understand, this was so the MC wouldn't appear to be talking to himself. The ghost agreed with the MC's statement, but then asked why the MC wasn't calling him Gongjanim or Lord Gongja. This was the last straw, and he started complaining that he wanted to go back to Marcus. But putting aside the banter, an hour and a half had already passed since the MC cleared the floor, and suddenly he heard a small sound, a simple cat meowing at him. However, the MC already knew who this cat was, but he decided to pretend he didn't. While he was playing with the kitten, several people approached him. He already knew who they were, and he even wondered why it had taken them an hour and a half to find him. Quickly, they stated their respective guilds, and just as one of them was about to introduce themselves, the MC told them to wait, as he had his own rules. First, they shouldn't tell anything to the media until the timer reached 0. The second rule was that he wanted a private place without any customers nearby. After they cleared the customers from the shop, they would begin negotiations. The MC asked them to start giving their offers, and they all began to say the same thing. However, the MC knew the reason for their desperation. The Sword Saint was a lone wolf, an isolated rank 1 who belonged to no guild, an existence that made people question the importance of guilds. guilds. If someone of his same caliber appeared, everyone would be desperate to recruit them. Suddenly, at that very moment, the cat spoke, offering 500,000 gold. That cat was none other than the master of the merchant union, rank 3, the Countess. She began by saying that the MC was quite brave for not being surprised by a cat transforming into a woman. However, the MC replied that he had seen many strange things lately, even dead people. An executive tried to assert himself against the Countess, stating that 500,000 gold and the position of vice leader was too risky. Even if the MC had cleared the floor this time, they didn't know his ability. However, the executive yielded to the pressure and said he was done speaking. The Countess said they should speak with their respective leaders, but those leaders would come to make the offers personally, as the current representatives were not on the same level. Quickly, everyone in the cafe disappeared, and shortly after, shouting was heard. They were none other than the top rankers: rank 5 Viper, rank 4 Inquisitor, our familiar Paladin, and finally, the equally important rank 2 Black Witch. At that moment, Viper began to complain, saying she was crazy for wanting to pay 500,000 gold and still offer the position of vice leader of her guild. However, the Inquisitor told them to sit down and have some coffee first. The other leaders liked the idea and started ordering their preferred drinks. Once they had decided, it was the MC's turn. However, the MC realized they had planned everything because all the guild leaders arrived after their executives left. This was no mere coincidence. They had agreed to this to confuse him. The ghost told the MC that he shouldn't be afraid. They were just trying to intimidate him. The MC knew this. He even compared this situation to the time he was burned alive. However, at this moment, he only needed to show one thing with his demeanor, and if anything truly scared him, he could simply go back in time and things would already be resolved. The first to ask questions was the Inquisitor, stating that before the 10th floor, the MC had no achievements. However, the Countess interrupted him, saying that he already had an achievement because he won her guild's lottery. Viper didn't like this situation much and said they should stop the charade and recruit him immediately. The Black Witch agreed with him and added that if he didn't plan to join any guild, he should let them know, as they needed time to prepare the announcement for the media. However, the MC posed a question. What if he did want to join one? She replied that if he wanted to join one, all the guilds would start a bidding war, as they had already lost too much time on the 9th floor. But because of the MC, they had a good reason to inform the rest of the world about the tower's value, a chance to gather people from all parts of the world, and also a motivation for the hunters who were stuck on the 1st floor. The MC states that bringing all these people from the outside world would deplete the food inside the tower in an instant. The Countess agrees with the MC, saying that even though she has connections to the outside world, it wouldn't be enough for them to produce new products and food. The Black Witch adds that they needed to encourage the hunters towards the new world, motivating them to explore and find new valuable things there, and for that, they needed an icon representing the era of revolution. However, the MC is hesitant because the Black Dragon Guild itself tried to kill this icon in his past life, and he didn't know why. Nevertheless, the MC would probably get along well with the Black Dragon leader, and he said he understood, as the guild he joined would represent the new generation of hunters, and the other guilds couldn't do anything against it, which would make him feel bad. They would decide the future with a simple card game, specifically a game of poker. The MC would join the guild of whoever won. However, if the MC won, he would ultimately join all guilds simultaneously, appearing as a normal guild member to outsiders, but receiving the same treatment as the leaders. Since they had nothing to lose, they all agreed. As the MC is not seen or anything, he asked the ghost if he didn't want to stop calling him Gongjanim, and that he could call him that after the game ended. However, he wanted the ghost to reveal everyone's cards, and obviously, hearing such a wonderful proposal, the ghost was extremely happy, and so the MC played, with the ghost feeding him tips. After a while, Viper was the first to complain, saying that the MC was definitely cheating because even after 30 rounds, he hadn't lost a single time. The MC replied that he was just a genius at poker, and therefore it wasn't good to accuse him without proof. Viper said that the MC was definitely not rank F. However, the MC stated that he had risen to rank E, so he was no longer rank F, and added that he had also run out of chips, so he lost. Shortly after, the Paladin was the next to lose, and the MC provoked her to try and guess if she was cheating or not, but she merely replied that young people nowadays are very difficult to deal with. As she approached the losers' tables, Viper started shouting that she was giving up too easily, that she should have tried until the end and shouldn't have let that thief win. However, she simply said that he shouldn't call their hero a thief. Regarding them possibly cheating, they all knew from the start, and it would be very strange if they didn't, because how could a rookie challenge them in a game of chance? The MC indirectly implied that he was confident enough to beat them without revealing his abilities, and they ended up accepting the challenge. She also told Viper that he should train his mind a bit more instead of just his muscles, and that they had nothing to lose with this game. Winning would be great, but there was nothing to lose either. However, Viper retorted, saying that they had to protect their pride, because how could they let a rookie of his level defeat them? However, the Paladin simply said that pride wouldn't help them advance in the tower. Returning to the poker game, the Black Witch said she was happy that at least the MC was a sensitive person, and she began to say that she originally came from Ukraine, or to be more exact, a place called Ukraine. Because of the long civil wars, she ended up losing her parents and became a wanderer, living alone, and that was very boring whether inside or outside the tower. However, the MC questioned her, asking what she meant by that, as everyone who came to the tower, especially the first generation, had a very sad story, and the MC was no exception, as he was also an orphan. The Black Witch added that the tower was basically her home, because there, no one asked where you were from, whether it was Korea or Ukraine, the celestial arts knowledge from China, or whatever place. None of that mattered inside the tower. They could understand each other thanks to the tower's blessings, and all food and challengers were equal, at least compared to the outside world. There, it was at least a bit fairer because, according to the witch, people outside treated the tower like a trash can. Just because many people say something doesn't mean it's true. Besides, when that counter in the sky reaches 0, the MC's life would change completely, and she believed that the MC would certainly handle it wisely. The MC said he would give them what they wanted. Moreover, he liked being the center of attention. He wanted everyone to admire and respect him, nothing more. As the game progressed, the MC knew she had an advantage, and he was at a disadvantage now, but he would go all in because he was simply confident. He told the Black Witch he wanted to make one thing very clear. He didn't expect to be treated that way just because he had cleared the 10th floor, because he would still clear the 20th, 30th, 50th, and even the 100th. No matter how long it took, he would conquer this tower, and he respected that the Black Witch had strength and feelings. He also had no intention of fighting them. However, he would consider her his rival. His goal wasn't to see the world inside the tower, but the world beyond it. She could use his name whenever she wanted to solve problems of hunger or anything else within the tower. However, he would need her help to climb the tower. The Black Witch remained silent for a while, but she realized he was exactly like the Sword Saint. Oh, and about the game, rest assured that the MC won. Before leaving, the MC said he was looking forward to the equal treatment he had been promised. However, the Black Witch questioned if he could maintain the level of responsibility. But a hunter's responsibility was merely to climb the tower, and regarding that, the MC was very calm. The Black Witch realized the MC was very confident. The MC then began to say that the 11th floor would open soon, so he had to prepare not to be left behind. But the Black Witch questioned how he would be preparing if he didn't even know what was there. He then gave them a hint that the theme of floors 11 to 20 was performance. And of course, he wasn't going to say where he got that information. He merely said he received this extra hint upon clearing the 10th floor. A short time later, the MC was among the people, where they were commenting on who this guy was who had completed the 10th floor. However, they didn't know, as there was no information available online. Then the timer reached 10, and people started counting along with the time. Meanwhile, our MC was looking at his phone, more specifically at the search tab, where he refreshed it, and the information about who had cleared the 10th floor was released. An intense glow appeared in the sky, and an announcement was made that, from that day on, the tutorial would be ending. From that light, a silhouette began to appear. It was a beautiful woman with golden curly hair. Obviously, seeing such an image, everyone wondered if it was a goddess. However, our ghost comrade replied that it wasn't a goddess. It was just how the tower's system explained the trials. Well, and for the curious, the MC asked how he knew that. However, at that very moment, someone jumped from a building and cut the so-called goddess in half. However, it was just a hologram, and the ghost replied that this was how he had discovered it wasn't a goddess in his previous life, because he had done the same thing. Then, at that very moment, the old man transferred to the 10th floor, and of course, the other top rankers didn't lag behind either. While everyone was transferring to the 11th floor, the hologram in the sky was still speaking, and of course, with such beauty, the MC stared with his mouth agape. The paladin arrived next to the MC, saying it was truly a shame, because the message that hologram was giving was probably from the tower's creators to them. However, no one seemed to care. Normally, they should be looking at it with admiration, because the mere existence of the tower and the abilities are already a miracle in themselves. The MC said she was more emotional than he thought. She replied that before going to the tower, she used to study music, and because of that, perhaps she had a more feminine touch than the others. However, at that very moment, looking to the side, several reporters started running towards the MC, questioning how he had managed it and what it felt like to clear the 10th floor. And of course, the paladin didn't want to be present for the MC's first media debut, so she transferred to the 11th floor. The reporters started pressing the MC even more. However, he was already getting nervous, and he merely told everyone that the 20th floor would also be cleared by him, so they should eagerly await it. Shifting scenes, more specifically on the 11th floor, we can see that it was pure chaos, and the 11th floor was more akin to war. And of course, seeing all that would suddenly leave anyone in shock. You might be wondering what's happening. Of course, something like this would occur as the tutorial was over. Such situations would become more common on the floors ahead. Suddenly, a soldier comes running towards the MC, saying that the heroes who would save the kingdom had finally arrived, and he pleads with everyone to help them immediately for the sake of humanity. He adds that the location was an open trade route, and without it, the kingdom wouldn't be able to sustain itself, which is why heroes from other worlds had to help him bestow their blessing upon the kingdom of Egan. At that very moment, a quest was issued, and the objective was clear. They had to protect the port. What truly instilled fear in them wasn't even protecting the port, but rather the mention of a demon king. However, they had no time to think, as the battle wouldn't wait. They assimilated the information And obviously, in the midst of war, the strongest always take the lead. And after seeing the Sword Saint's performance, everyone else began to exert themselves even more. And you might be wondering, what about the MC? Well, he was calm because he was now receiving rewards for clearing the 10th floor, and his reward was access to all maps from floors 11 to 20. This reward was only for the normal stage. Now, for clearing the 10th floor in a secret stage, he received another reward. He would receive an NPC map from the 11th floor to the 20th, and as a bonus, he could choose any item that exists between those floors. Seeing all those reward windows and notifications before him, our MC was ecstatic. Skipping all this reward talk, let's discuss something about the tower. More specifically, its themes. Every floor has a theme, and the theme for floors 1 to 10 was tutorial, and the city was designed for beginners to get accustomed to the tower, with each floor having designated hunting areas. This was different from the theme of floors 11 to 20, which was heroes, kings, and demons. Currently, there were only 2 ways to defeat the demon army. The first, you just need enough strength to contribute and destroy the entire army by yourself, or a spirit of leadership to rally an army for battle. The ghost says that, judging by the MC's words, the first option was certainly not suitable for him. And how would he manage the second option, given that he had never led anything unless it was amateurs? The MC denies this, but he was sure he could learn to be a confident leader. At that very moment, he opens the NPC location window and began searching only for NPCs on the 11th floor, filtering for the top 100 with the highest skill level. Seeing the MC's strategy, the ghost obviously told him not to do that, as he should fight them, not die to them and steal their skills. However, the MC said he wanted to save time, so he only wanted NPCs with skills and leadership, and in the end, he found only 3. And of course, to make things even more cheaty, the map also showed where these people were. The MC says this game is all about skills, which is why he transformed his already good and incredible skills into even better rewards, all thanks to his abilities. But from the ghost's perspective, this was just hacking. However, this was also part of the MC's abilities. Following the blue dot on the map, the MC found the first NPC with the highest skill and leadership, and it was none other than the general, the one who had greeted him when he arrived on the floor. The MC quickly said he had a request for him, and he asked him to kill him because he had a secret last resort, and when his heart stopped beating, the goddess of war would bless the battlefield. In essence, it was like a self-destruction skill, and if they could activate this blessing, they would win the battle. However, the general didn't want to do it because he couldn't take the life of an ally. Yet the MC insisted, saying that he should consider what was happening, because if the general didn't kill him, he would take his own life, as he knew this was the best way to help the kingdom. For this reason, he was asking the general to kill him, because he was responsible for the battle at the port, and instead of dying by his own hands or in the clutches of enemies, he wanted to entrust his life to a general who was risking his life to protect the kingdom. And of course, hearing all these cunning words from the MC, the ghost was dumbfounded, because the general was actually believing him. The general began to lament, regretting that he had to take the life of a hero simply because he couldn't win a war against the demon king, and he would do it quickly and painlessly. He held the MC's name in his heart and declared that the MC was truly a real hero. There's a saying about someone who soars above those who merely run, and another about a hunter who shatters soldiers alongside other hunters, turning them into swords. Obviously, this confusing saying was created by none other than our own MC. Battle knowledge skill. This was the skill the MC created, one that allowed him to pretend to be a military arts expert and gain the general's trust. The MC is super efficient thanks to his minimap, as well as the knowledge of having lived the same day multiple times. However, in the end, skills aren't everything. That shining sword in the MC's hand was called the Holy Sword of Leah Fanta Aegon's Protection. Let's understand a bit about its origin, as it will be important later on. According to legend, a goddess gifted it to the founder of the Aegon Empire, and before he became a legend in history, he simply vanished, and the Holy Sword went with him, leaving behind only a prophecy that whoever possessed that Holy Sword should receive the complete trust and absolute support of all the people of the Empire. Obviously, seeing such an inscription, the MC took advantage and picked up this sword. The MC began to tell the ghost that it was worth completing the secret stage to have that view. However, the ghost said that he traded his reward for a trash item like that because the sword was merely shiny and hard, and among the many epic items available, he chose that one. However, the MC said that it had high durability and was shiny, making all NPCs from the 11th to the 20th floor go crazy for it. Also, NPCs aren't just tools to give quests, they are also entities that should be used to complete those very quests that they themselves cannot. While all the soldiers were running under the MC's command, most of the hunters were wondering why he was the army's only general. However, hearing their envious remarks, the MC became even more ecstatic, and the ghost told him to stop being foolish, as he should only be improving his swordsmanship and aura, yet he was simply using his aura to enhance his hearing to listen to what others were saying about him. But cutting to the chase, they realized that the eastern flank of the demon army had been annihilated, and the MC gave the order to continue advancing towards their main forces. The more they pressured them, the more likely they were to win. They killed so many goblins along the way that they ended up encountering their leader, who was the boss of the 11th floor, the Emperor. Of course, to top it all off, the MC was going to make a grand scene, finishing off the boss himself. After the boss had fallen to the ground, the entire army began to shout that they had finally defeated the evil army, and of course, seeing their leader's defeat, the goblins began to retreat. As they were merely retreating and everyone was afraid, most of the hunters became very disheartened and quickly charged at them, thus finishing off all remaining monsters and clearing the floor. The tower began to tally each participant's points. However, there were too many people, so it only managed the top 10 contributors to the raid. Looking at the scoreboard, everyone realized that the MC was in first place. Looking at the name on the screen, they realized it was the same person who had completed the 10th floor and began to question among themselves. Could it be some kind of secret master? However, the ghost said that he was no master at all. He was just a trickster abusing hacks. The MC questioned if he had finally admitted that it was just a game of skills. However, he refused, and the MC noted that the ghost truly valued technique above skills. For this reason, the MC promised to practice his swordsmanship before reaching the 90th floor, and for that reason, the ghost should stop grumbling that the MC only relied on hacks. He further added that he didn't want to miss the opportunity to learn from the Sword Emperor, and in fact, the ghost should be begging him to teach swordsmanship techniques. Hearing these words, the ghost became very excited. However, interrupting their conversation, the general approached the MC, thanking him because they had achieved victory thanks to him. The MC said it was nothing, and thanks to everyone's hard work. However, the general commented that his worries had been for nothing. For a long time, there had been a prophecy that one day the demonic army would reach them, but they shouldn't fear, as heroes from another world would also be summoned. Regarding this prophecy, he had been somewhat skeptical. Would these heroes truly fight with all their might for a world that wasn't even theirs? But seeing how dedicated everyone was, it seemed his worries were unfounded, and that's why he wanted to thank them properly. Well, even though they were from different worlds, the act of shaking hands still held the same meaning. Was it because, regardless of which world they were in, humans still had two hands? And so, the two shook hands. The system finished analyzing the floor rewards. The first reward was for the raid's top contributors. All 10 contributors would have early access to the 12th floor, and until all 10 received their rewards, everyone else would be prohibited from accessing the floor. In the last scene before the MC ascended to the 12th floor, the general said he was leaving the Empire's fate in his hands. While being transported to the 12th floor, the ghost asked the MC if he would be alright with the Sword Saint being there with him. The MC told him not to worry, as the worst that could happen was him getting killed. Thus, the MC arrived on the 12th floor, more specifically, at the palace of the Egan Empire. Suddenly, the Inquisitor approached the MC and praised him for his performance on the 11th floor. The Inquisitor asked if the sword he used was the reward from the 11th floor, and the MC confirmed that it was. The Inquisitor added that he was impressed by the efficiency with which the MC used the things at his disposal, and the MC felt a bit embarrassed. However, at that very moment, the Sword Saint tried to attack him, but the Inquisitor barely intercepted him. The Inquisitor questioned the Sword Saint about why he was doing that, but the Sword Saint was not in the mood for conversation. He simply told him to get out of the way, or he would also be killed, adding that he better be quick, or he would cut off both his arms in the process. The Inquisitor stated that this would be a nuisance, and if he allowed the Sword Saint to kill the MC, the reputation of the Great Five Guilds would be ruined. The question was why he was after him, but the Sword Saint said he had no obligation to tell. The Inquisitor, however, said that since the Sword Saint had no intention of backing down, he would have to resort to force. At that very moment, both Viper and the Paladin attacked the Sword Saint, but he obviously defended himself. Viper shouted, asking how he could be so strong and healthy at his old age. However, the Paladin told him to be silent, as they should focus on the fight, because before them stood the number 1 ranked individual. At that very moment, the Inquisitor asked the Countess to give him just 10,000 gold. She said she would even lend it to him, but with 15% interest, payable in up to 3 installments. However, the Inquisitor said he didn't want a loan. He was asking her to give him the money. She questioned if he thought her money was for some kind of charity, but the Inquisitor merely retorted that her money was dirty, and if she donated it to the temple, she could happily go to paradise. She didn't want to argue against that, and a bag of coins began to fall on the Inquisitor. Then he activated his ability, more specifically a buff, and all the coins around him had already vanished. The Inquisitor declared that both Viper and the Paladin would be completely different, and even if the Sword Saint was number 1, he would still have difficulty against the 3 of them. However, there were 4, as the Black Witch would also join them. This was because the day before, the MC had made an official agreement with all 5 great guilds. Currently, the hunter Kim Gongja had joined all 5 guilds, with a status equivalent to that of a master. Therefore, if the Sword Saint pointed his sword at him, it would be the same as pointing his sword at all of them. But the MC already knew this from the start, and in fact, he had already planned it. He asked the ghost if he didn't remember the words he had said before, that there were 2 ways to fight a strong opponent. One was to have enough strength to defeat an entire army alone, and the other was to raise and command one's own army. An isolated hunter was useless against a hunter in a powerful alliance. It was completely overwhelming. The MC had a plan from the beginning, so he approached the Sword Saint and asked if they could talk. He stated that he was very shocked by what had happened, and didn't understand the reason for the attack, as this was the first time he had seen him. Furthermore, the MC was a huge fan of the glorious Sword Saint. Of course, the Sword Saint didn't believe him, likely still thinking the MC was an assassin sent sent by the Black Dragon who had killed 4,093 people. In other words, a complete conspiracy in his eyes. The Sword Saint then declared that the outside world and Babylon weren't very different, because ever since he entered the tower, everyone had pressured him every single day to join a guild, yet he had firmly rejected all those offers. The reason was that he wanted to show everyone that in this tower, it was possible to reach the top on one's own, without bloodline, solitude, or affiliations, unlike the outside world, which was tainted with useless things. He stated that a single person could become the best with a sword, and he wanted to give hope to the people. However, instead, what had they been doing? They had all become stones that stagnated the world. Viper began shouting, saying that he hadn't helped with the raids on the 5th, 7th, and 9th floors either. The Countess added that if she had used his influence in the outside world, the food shortage in the tower wouldn't be so severe, and the tower's society might have been more safely stabilized. Finally, the Black Witch added that if he was the #1 ranker, then he should take on his responsibilities as the #1 ranker. However, the Sword Saint told them to shut up and questioned if they were adults, as they were constantly crying, and if by any chance he was their grandfather. If they had so much nonsense to say, they should talk to their swords. Hearing these words, the MC began to question them, as they were still fighting even with only 10 people around, because even the NPCs on the 11th floor had gathered to save their own country. But as hunters, they should focus on clearing the 10th floor instead of pointing fingers at each other and holding grudges. Wouldn't it be better for them to focus on their objectives? If this continued, they would be worse than the NPCs themselves. All of them were asking for their help. Even if he was perhaps just a hologram created by the tower, they still said their nation was on the verge of collapse. How could they, as summoned heroes, put the Empire second? Because if you solve problems others can't, then you are a hero. For this reason, they should focus on clearing the rest of the floors, just as they did with the 11th. The Paladin was the first to sheath her weapon, agreeing with the MC's words, and even if she didn't understand why the Sword Saint attacked, it was clear that this wasn't the time for them to be fighting each other, and so she would make a small sacrifice. She then showed everyone that she possessed a lie detection ability, and it was no exaggeration to say that this ability was what earned her the position of vice captain of the civil militia. Now, if the MC and the Sword Saint trusted her words, she would ensure that she validated their statements. The MC realized she was the perfect opportunity, so he declared that he would believe her, and the Sword Saint said the same, as out of all of them, she was the only one who had never harmed another human being. She then declared that they could make their statements. The first question came from the Sword Saint, asking if the MC had assassinated more than 4,000 people. The MC confirmed that he had, and at that very moment, the Sword Saint began to declare that he was a mass murderer who had deceived them. However, the Paladin stated that it was a lie. In other words, he hadn't killed more than 4,000 people. The Sword Saint began to get confused and break out in a cold sweat, and he declared that this was because he was an elite assassin. The MC confirmed that he was, but of course that was a lie. The Sword Saint began to say that he thought the Paladin would mediate the questions without lying, yet she herself had asked if they trusted her from the beginning, or was he perhaps going back on his word? The Sword Saint said it wasn't possible that he hadn't killed anyone, but the MC stated that he had killed, and it had been only one person, and because that person had deserved it, and if he hadn't killed the person he did, he would have become a serial killer. After all these declarations, everything the MC had said was true. Even the ghost was embarrassed, saying that he had told the old man not to rely solely on things like abilities. Then the MC approached the Sword Saint, saying that it seemed there had been a great misunderstanding, and of course he was happy that it had been a simple misunderstanding. However, if the guild leaders hadn't protected him, he probably would have died. The MC thought he needed something from the Sword Saint, perhaps an apology. The Paladin agreed with the MC's statement, as the Sword Saint was completely wrong. The Sword Saint began to stammer. How would he act? Despite her reputation as a pure person, the Paladin was still part of the 5 great guilds. Would he lie, or reveal his ability to explain his actions? He could silence the MC by killing him, just as the Flame Emperor had done. Sometimes when people are in the wrong, they blame or distrust others, much like the Flame Emperor revealed his evil nature by trying to silence the MC. For this reason, the Sword Saint's true character would be decided by his choice. He then apologized, admitting he was wrong. He had thought carelessly, leading to presumptuous actions that almost caused him to kill someone for no reason. Until now, he had always based someone's death on his own judgment, believing that anyone who deserved to leave the world should die as soon as possible. The MC noted that instead of doubting the Paladin, making excuses with his ability, or even killing the MC to silence him, the Sword Saint chose to accept his guilt, and for that, he unhesitatingly begged a rookie hunter for forgiveness. And the phrases that came to the MC's mind were, "I'm sorry for being wrong. From now on, I would never kill anyone because of my ability. I want to live. Please forgive me." And all of it was true. Seeing such sincerity from the Sword Saint, the MC said one thing. He asked if the Sword Saint could teach him the art of swordsmanship. To be more precise, he needed a sparring partner. He had a teacher, but no one to duel against, and he wished the Sword Saint could be his partner. However, he corrected himself. In truth, he wanted to forgive him without receiving anything in return. but he would feel embarrassed, as it would make him seem superior, when in fact he wasn't even that impressive. For the MC, having the Sword Saint as a sparring partner would be enough. Since their swords had already crossed, he felt somewhat awkward having to apologize to someone as if he were superior. For this reason, he wanted the Sword Saint to teach him his best swordsmanship technique. Hearing everything the MC had declared, the Paladin affirmed that everything he said was true. Witnessing all of this, the Inquisitor was the first to rejoice, exclaiming that he had never seen such a sincere apology in his entire life, calling it almost a divine miracle. But the Countess immediately began to complain, asking them not to ruin the happy ending, even though her money didn't mean it was all in vain. However, no one paid attention to her. The Sword Saint began to declare how he could have judged such a kind person so wrongly. He said that if the MC wanted a sparring partner, it would be his pleasure. He would be ready whenever the MC wished. He even said the MC could call him Grandpa Marcus, and started spouting a lot of nonsense, saying he wanted the MC to meet his granddaughter, or perhaps even marry her. However, the MC remained calm. The Sword Saint's expression quickly changed, asking if the MC wasn't interested in his granddaughter. Gongjia corrected himself, saying it wasn't that. He simply wasn't interested in dating anyone. A commotion of shouts erupted, and the ghost began to say that, as he had mentioned before, the old man was very annoying. So annoying that he never listened to others, and it wouldn't be surprising if he ended up earning a title called God of Annoyance. The MC declared in his thoughts that he wished he hadn't discovered that. But at that very moment, the system announced that the MC had finished the 11th floor in first place, and from now on, he would receive the completion rewards. Since he had finished first, the reward would be delivered to him first. They had already heard about the completion conditions for floors 12 to 20 before returning, but he wanted to know what kind of reward this would be. A window appeared before the MC, and in short, the MC had managed to choose one of the Empire's positions and would receive corresponding skills and attributes. The choice he made now would decide his path up to the 20th floor. As the MC had said before, from the 11th to the 20th floor, the theme was the staging of heroes and the Demon King. Hunters would assume positions within the Egan Empire, receiving skills and attributes, and the top contributors from previous floors would have the privilege of choosing these special positions before anyone else. The MC had a position in mind, but he wanted to see the Demon King's reward. The objective was clear and simple. He had to kill all of the top 10, excluding himself. If he did so, the Demon King's authority would immediately send the MC to the 99th floor. Seeing this option, the MC was shocked. Now, which one should he choose? Obviously, the ghost said this was a trap, and the MC knew it because there was no way the Flame Emperor wouldn't have chosen this reward, since in his previous life, instead of being on the 99th floor, he stopped at the 40th floor. Therefore, this reward was nothing more than a trap. He probably chose this reward, realized it was a trap, and returned to the past. However, it was tempting. What if he went to the 99th floor? But the ghost told the MC not to do it, as he had spoken with someone who experienced the 99th floor and failed. This option was one of the worst traps. The MC questioned if the boss of that floor was really that strong, and the ghost said that wasn't it, or rather, there was no such thing as a boss. It was something far more sinister. Anyway, he had warned him as a friend, and he didn't want to admit it, but the MC was doing very well and would eventually clear the 99th floor. Then Gongjia said he would do things the right way. He would follow the safest route and even ignore the rewards, as he wanted to see how things would unfold. At that moment, he declared to the others that a reward window had appeared for him. The Black Witch said she was truly bored because it was taking too long, and the MC stated he wouldn't select any reward. The Paladin questioned the MC why he had done that, but at the same moment, the Sword Saint said he understood why the MC had made that choice. However, he questioned if it was truly necessary to ignore the rewards. Nevertheless, the MC simply said he regretted nothing. Then the Sword Saint chose the goddess's reward, and his position would be that of Chief of the Egan Empire Knights. Immediately, several knights appeared. The next to receive a reward was the Inquisitor, and he said it seemed like a game of cops and robbers, but for everyone to understand what he was talking about, he would show them. Everyone was surprised. It truly was a game of cops and robbers. The Inquisitor said they should call the goddess's allies cops, and those who sided with the Demon King robbers. It seemed that siding with the robbers would certainly have disadvantages, as the Paladin would quickly discover them. He added that the MC's choice wasn't all that great, but he would respond, so he chose the position of Grand General of the Empire. Viper ended up choosing the position of Chief of the Royal Bodyguard, the Paladin chose Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Black Witch chose the position of Chancellor. Lastly, the Countess chose Minister of Finance. Thus, everyone chose their respective positions. At that moment, the system began to report who had claimed the rewards. One person had not claimed a reward. 8 people received the goddess's reward, and 1 received the Demon King's. Obviously, after seeing such a notification, chaos ensued. Then the Black Witch declared that, as the master of the Black Dragon Guild, whoever chose the Demon King's reward would suffer the most painful death of all, and asked the Paladin to begin interrogating everyone present. The first person she interrogated was the least likely. She questioned if the MC had chosen the Demon King's reward, but he denied it, and of course that was true. So she interrogated them one by one, leader by leader, until she reached the last of them, who was the Black Witch. And it wasn't her either. They began to wonder, how could this be? If it wasn't any of the 10, then who was it? And the Paladin told them not to panic. The Inquisitor, at that moment, said that it took them over 10 years to become the 5 great guilds and cooperate with each other. In other words, it was difficult to trust anyone not from the 5 great guilds, and they didn't have 10 years to build trust with the others present. The Paladin tried to stop the Inquisitor, saying that efficiency wasn't what mattered now. However, he had already activated his skill, and Viper was advancing alongside them, so they killed them one by one to get to the last of them, who was obviously also killed. The system itself warned that none of the 3 were agents of the Demon King. The Inquisitor declared that they were now in a very bad situation, as their 10-year connection was about to be destroyed. The Paladin declared that she had warned him to wait, but just as the Inquisitor was about to speak, his arm was cut off, or rather, caught in the crossfire between the Sword Saint and Viper. The Paladin then said she would trust the MC's judgment, because since he was the only person who refused the rewards, he was certainly the only one who couldn't be the traitor. Seeing that madness before him, the MC wanted to ask the ghost if all the people he attracts are psychopaths. However, the ghost merely said that the MC hadn't given up the reward just knowing this would happen. However, the MC said there was tension among the top rankers, and he presumed a fight would start if there was a traitor. For this reason, he gave up the rewards, but he didn't imagine it would be this bad. So the MC approached the Paladin and asked if she could tell him a little about the Inquisitor. She replied that he had always been like that. More specifically, when they entered the tower, religion was a big problem, and the various religions were always fighting each other. It was at that point, when the Inquisitor appeared, that he killed everyone. The MC remembered that, in his past life, the religious groups had indeed reached a peaceful agreement, but it was probably the media covering them. The Inquisitor said he regretted his judgment and knew that what was happening was because of his actions, but to stop all that fighting, he needed the MC to ask the Sword Saint to stop the battle. The MC tried to get the Sword Saint's attention, saying they should resolve this fight through dialogue. He was asking in the name of his granddaughter, and if she ever entered the tower, he would surely meet her, so he couldn't ignore the words of his future great-grandson. The Sword Saint said he still hadn't forgiven them and wouldn't stop this fight just because he heard the MC. However, he realized that when they crossed swords, he could kill them at any moment, so once they found the traitor, he would certainly kill him immediately. The MC continued, saying he could kill him later. Then he began to say that they should calm down, because as long as they didn't know who the traitor might be, they might never find him. However, this wasn't the most important thing, as they could resolve this crisis without finding the traitor. The Paladin questioned the MC about how this would happen, since whoever chose the Demon King's reward aimed to kill all of them. However, the MC told them to look more closely at what was written in the quest. According to him, the Demon King's core was on the 20th floor, and that's why they shouldn't focus on the traitor. He would probably be covered in fear, or perhaps the system itself had forcibly created a traitor to achieve its objectives. If they got rid of him, the rewards would also disappear. So it was a very simple and easy problem to solve. They should climb the tower and break the Demon King's core. When the MC opened the door, a sound of rain was heard, but it wasn't normal rain. It seemed to be similar to blood. The soldiers, seeing that rain, began to fall into despair, and no one understood what was happening. However, the MC calmly walked among them and broke the glass. That rain was the result of the Demon King having manifested at that instant. He began to speak, questioning if the Empire really thought they could defeat him by sending people from another world against him. They could even send more if they wanted, but they were still humans, therefore flawed beings. And those who don't see humans as humans shall be swallowed by their own wickedness. The system gave them the mission, and in summary, they had to stop the Demon King or make him retreat, taking advantage of his weakened form. Now I ask you, how on earth was that weakened? Obviously, seeing the mission objective and such a monster before them, they began to wonder if it was truly possible to complete that mission. The MC said they should calm down, because the tower didn't give missions they couldn't complete, and they weren't mere hunters either. For example, Viper was the chief of the Royal Guard, so he should trust them, because this stage couldn't be completed with just the hunter's powers. That's why he had to treat the NPCs as if they were real people, and guide them into battle. As commanders, they had to act like commanders. Since the Paladin was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they needed to find the Emperor, because an army without its leader nearby would have its morale crushed. As for the Inquisitor, the MC didn't like him much, but it wasn't the time for conflict. Unlike the MC, the Inquisitor said he liked him much more now. However, the MC simply stated that the soldiers were in front of the castle walls, so the Inquisitor should control them on his own, and no matter what happened, he had to defend the castle walls, because if their defenses fell, the stage would be over. The Inquisitor declared that he would protect them with his own life. Thus, everyone went to their respective positions, and since the top 10 had already received their rewards, the other hunters were able to enter the floor. Cutting to another scene, the Black Witch approached the MC, and he questioned how she had reached him so quickly. She replied that it was her unique skill, called teleportation teleportation, which allowed her to teleport anywhere within her field of vision. Obviously, such an overpowered skill had to be copied, and even the ghost agreed that the MC could use his hack to steal this ability. However, continuing the conversation, the MC questioned what she was doing there instead of going to the castle walls. She replied that she obviously came to take him with her, because the MC possessed a sword that made all the NPCs on the 11th floor admire him. Like it or not, they needed to boost the morale of this army. That's why the person the soldiers needed now wasn't her, but the MC. Suddenly, she extended her hand to the MC and said that he needed to verbally consent to teleport with her, as this was the restriction of her skill. The MC asked if it was alright for her to reveal her skill's restriction, as it could be a trump card, but she simply replied that she was currently the Chancellor of the Empire, and there was nothing strange about a Chancellor using her trump cards to protect her nation. So the MC consented, and they were thus teleported to the castle wall. Seeing the state of the soldiers, the MC realized something. NPCs were different beings from real people, and even if they were illusions, their fear was still real. The Black Witch told the MC to pay attention to what she was about to do, as she couldn't simply retreat after only showing her evil side, nor had she become the master of the Black Dragon Guild for nothing. At that very moment, she called the soldiers' attention and began to declare that they should gather their strength, for they were the Empire's one true wall. Looking at her, the soldiers began to feel a ray of hope. She continued, saying that as long as they stood, the Empire would not fall. Suddenly, she grabbed the MC's arm and raised it. At that very moment, the holy sword began to shine, and the rain, for a brief moment, stopped falling. Hold on, hold on, hold on! Do you remember that the MC was killed by the general on the 11th floor? And since he was now E-ranked, he would receive a penalty for using the skill. No one knew why, when, or how it happened. However, when he appeared, the red rain began to fall. When the rain fell, blood covered the ground, and every time a nation fell, the dominion of humans began to shrink, and the history of humanity became shorter and shorter. Every time the Empire's territory vanished, only the rain fell and continued to fall. An incessant rain resembling blood, and this was the cause of everyone's despair. Royal historians solemnly used their ornate quills. They accepted their fate to write, and thus, humanity was extinguished by its own hands. The master of nightmares, king of all demonic creatures, historians named him as follows, the Demon King. When that intense glow appeared above the castle walls, people began to feel a ray of hope, as they thought the goddess was protecting them. But that was wrong. It hadn't been such a great authority, and the rain had only stopped where the light of the holy sword reached. However, small things are sometimes enough, and for humans who had nothing, far from being small things, this was already enough to rekindle their strength. Initially, the reason there were no NPCs in the royal chamber was because each of the dignitaries had abandoned the empire, and it was probably for this reason that the tower chose the empire as a stage, just like the abandoned children in the mansion on the 10th floor. At that very moment, the Black Witch finished her speech and questioned the MC why he was looking at her that way. Was a Ukrainian speech really that bad for him? She says her old country was full of communists, and while she didn't like them much, they were great at making speeches, so she picked up a few things here and there. The MC didn't understand what she meant by that, but it was probably a joke. She asked the MC what he was going to do now, as they needed to protect the castle walls. Well, the Black Witch's S-rank ability was called teleportation, so he could simply teleport near the Demon King immediately, but they would instantly be surrounded by monsters. So the MC told her they needed to create a situation where he would be in isolated combat against the Demon King, and therefore, while the NPCs were resisting, they should gather the hunters, because at least with their help, they shouldn't be massacred. Returning to the previous topic, he asked her to transport him directly to the Demon King. She questioned if he was perhaps trying to commit suicide. Well, it was fair for her to justify herself and have those doubts. However, the MC planned to win, as he also had an ace up his sleeve. The Black Witch merely said she hoped his sword was sharp enough to pierce the boss. At that moment, the Demon King began to speak, saying that the goddess enjoyed fun games, but wasn't it pathetic to be called a final combat? Light? What good would it be for those who wouldn't even live to see tomorrow? Since he wanted so much to show his own light, he would give them a taste of his light. In that instant, the Demon King attacked, defeating several soldiers instantly, while others were gravely wounded. Amidst this attack, one of them ended up being killed. The Black Witch remembered that both the Sword Saint, the Inquisitor, and Viper should be on their way with their troops, and the Paladin was probably looking for the Emperor as the MC had requested. So the only person remaining was the Countess, and in the end, she wasn't the traitor either. However, this was concerning, as the Countess was the only one who had connections from the tower to the outside world. But the Black Witch said they had no time for lamenting, because they should focus on what was before them. Looking at the map, the MC realized that the demonic army had changed formation and were probably attempting a charge. In that instant, they teleported to the front line of battle. Arriving there, the ghost wanted to tell the MC something, that from that moment on, a new training would begin, and he should last at least, at minimum, 30 seconds. because to win that war, he needed to become the people's hope, and no matter how long, he just needed to show the scene that he was holding off the monsters on his own. No one becomes a hero by living 30 years, but when everyone desperately needs 30 seconds, giving them those 30 seconds is what makes someone a hero. That's why he should become one. The ghost wanted to teach the MC a few things when he reached the 20th floor, but it was time to practice a bit. He should pivot his back foot, plant his front foot firmly on the ground, and calmly look forward. He noticed there were 2 goblins in front of him, and the ghost added that in a fight, what matters isn't an absolute second, but rather a relative second. That's why he should use his sword to blind them and steal that 1 second from them. At that moment, the MC's sword became faster than his 1 second, and in that instant, what everyone needed was a true hero. So the MC killed one after another, and he was so fast that before one goblin's head fell, he was already killing the next. That was the symphony of the sword, and his movements were like music, a low note preparing the ground for a high note, and he was connecting one with the other. His sword was flowing continuously, and since the MC was a novice, he should have that 1 second no matter what. That's why he shouldn't lose control of time. After killing one, he had to find the next. He should live every second to the fullest, and he wouldn't truly be living if he just let time flow, because one only truly lives when dedicating something to time. All this killing he had done had only lasted 10 seconds. In that instant, the MC began to question something. Why did the tower give an X-rank ability to someone like him? It wouldn't be a problem if it were given to a great saint, or perhaps a normal person, but among all people, why was it given to a psychopath? Or perhaps the tower thought it was unchallengeable for anyone other than the Flame Emperor. Did one need to become like him to reach the top? But the MC wouldn't accept that. He would clear the 20th floor in place of the Flame Emperor, the 30th, the 50th, and even the 100th. He would show everyone that he wasn't wrong to kill him. At that moment, the MC leveled up to rank D. As he advanced towards the monsters, the Sword Saint moved alongside him and decapitated all the goblins in front of them. He said something to the MC, but it was unintelligible. However, he stopped and repeated himself, declaring that the attack had been fantastic. He stated his name was Marcus Callenberry. This was the second time a rank 1 hunter had told the MC their name. However, they were different names and different people. This is why he could now do what he could never have done in the past: proudly state his own name to people. Thus, the rank 1 hunter, Sword Saint, chief of the Egan Empire Knights, re-entered the battle. At that moment, more people arrived. They were the knights led by the Inquisitor, and another one of them joined the battle. But the MC noticed that everything around him was silent, and only one thought crossed his mind: to move forward. He was focused on the battle and nothing else. Even Viper, who was following him, noticed his complete concentration. Then, the only thing he said was that his name was Liao Fan, and he declared that he would protect the MC as he was the rising star. At that very moment, the Demon King began to speak, asking if they thought they had any time. The goddess was very weak, and now, who would they rely on? Perhaps their own existence, and if so, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. When he attacked, the Black Witch stepped forward and repelled his attacks with her mirror, diminishing their force, and Viper and the Sword Saint managed to stop the assault. At that moment, the Black Witch called out to the MC, asking him to take her hand. However, he remembered that everything happening would soon vanish, as people wouldn't recall anything that had occurred. Just because they wouldn't remember didn't mean things would disappear. This is how a person who died on the 1st floor, and a spirit who died on the 99th floor managed to get there. When he returned, nothing would have been resolved. However, he would be a little stronger and also do things a little better. At that moment, they stood before the Demon King, who declared that he had made it clear there was a traitor among their group, yet they clung to the trust they had in each other as if stitching together scraps. However, scraps could not become a real dress. At that very moment, the MC released the Black Witch's hand and, in his thoughts, apologized. Perhaps they wouldn't remember the events that happened today, but it would be for a greater good. Well, now it was time for the second round. At this moment, the MC had another thought. Why would the tower, after giving such power to someone like Yu Suha, give such an opportunity to someone useless like him? Perhaps the tower was disappointed with the attitudes displayed by the hunters. Perhaps the Flame Emperor used his strength to clear the 10th floor, and perhaps the tower didn't consider that a disgrace. Each floor had a secret mission, and the 12th floor was certainly no exception. The Demon King had 3 abilities that caught the MC's attention, but he already knew which one he would take. The ghost questioned if he was really going to take that one, and the MC replied that it would at least be useful until the 20th floor. The ghost didn't understand, but the MC probably had a plan. Then the MC asked the ghost if he could answer one thing, if he knew what the old man did every day. The ghost replied yes, he plans the entire day, from the moment he wakes up until the moment he goes to sleep. The MC told him to explain his routine, as he would need it for something. After choosing the skill card, and now that he was rank D, he ended up seeing the Demon King's trauma. However, let's talk about that nightmare another time. The MC went back 24 hours in time, reliving everything again. Well, the 11th floor wouldn't be a problem, but on the 12th, where the Demon King appears, they would all have a fight. The Black Witch questioned if the MC was all right, as he seemed strange. However, he simply replied that he was a bit emotional after thinking about being with incredible people like them. Then he declared that he knew the situation of the 11th floor, floor. And not only that, he also knew its mission. Hearing this, they asked if he could share that information with them. The MC said it was possible. However, there was a condition. There would be a moment when he would ask them for a favor, and they should listen to that request. He couldn't say what it was yet, and it wasn't anything that involved someone's life or asking for money, and if they thought it was an impossible request, then they were welcome to reject it. The Inquisitor was the first to agree to the condition, and the Countess said that from the moment he stated they could refuse the request, she accepted his terms. The MC, hearing their responses, saw that the first step was complete, and with that, the 11th floor just became a little easier to clear. At that moment, the MC caught the Paladin's attention and asked if she could take a walk with him, as he had something to ask her. It would be quick, 30 minutes at most. As they walked, everyone was talking about who cleared the 10th floor, but this was no longer important to the MC because the old man was following him. The ghost told the MC not to look back, as the old man had an almost perfect stealth ability, so even if he looked, he wouldn't be able to see him. But there was one thing the MC realized in his last attempt. It would be too late to try and resolve things with the Sword Saint on the 12th floor. He needed to resolve this misunderstanding before continuing up the tower, because the Sword Saint had a really complicated relationship with the guild masters, and if he pointed his sword at the MC, he would automatically become an enemy of all guild masters, and adding a traitor to the mix. How would that turn out? The Paladin questioned the MC about where they were going, and he simply replied that he had a shop he wanted to show her. But, in reality, what the MC had been doing so far was provoking the Sword Saint. He had been deliberately luring him, using the information he had received from the ghost, and the Sword Saint started following him as soon as he saw him. Of course, the Paladin knew nothing of this. The MC began talking about the shop he was taking her to, managed by an unknown but very skilled pharmacist, who would probably become famous in the future if she received some recognition. That's why he wanted her help with the business. She questioned if this was true, and the MC realized she had activated her ability. He simply said he was trying to get her help and was sure that this was probably perceived as true by her ability. A little later, they arrived at the shop, and the girl asked who the person next to the MC was. He simply said she was the vice captain of the civil militia, or perhaps better known as the Paladin. The girl immediately became desperate, as the MC had brought someone very important to a humble shop like hers, and quickly knelt, thinking it was some kind of drug bust. She immediately declared that she had never once touched any kind of drug or created any harmful medicine. The Paladin had probably activated her ability again, and was certainly confused, because all of it was true. The MC approached the girl, telling her to calm down, as he was the one who had brought her there. The girl asked why he had done that, but the MC said that despite her being so talented, she had no work to do. And for that reason, he wanted to introduce her to the Paladin so she could give her some sample potions. Hearing these words, she became extremely happy, saying that the MC was an angel. However, at that very moment, another customer arrived, and